Sup, my fellas. Don't forget to leave feedback, and enjoy the story. A view of the Tower of Strangers opened up. Creatures appeared. The thought arose that a catastrophe had suddenly struck the world. A huge number of monsters had fallen from the tower, and humanity could not do anything about its destruction. People had already accepted their fate. There was a glow around the people, and it was said that even then the so-called creators founded the first transcendental generation. They confronted the monsters, and then captured and destroyed the tower. The man raised his weapon up. The thought arose that this was how people defeated the invaders from another dimension. A mausoleum appeared. It was said that the creators saved the world, and their glory will be forever preserved in the mausoleum of the creators. Several hundred years have passed. The hero smiled, reflecting on the fact that his name is Minato. He is in the library, and he likes to read the biographies of the founders. The bodies of people were lying in a pile, and he added that he was a swordsman who was able to defeat an entire army using only a tree branch. The girl sat on the throne, and the protagonist thought that a sorceress who had reached the truth of magic, capable of controlling all kinds of magic without words, in their time was considered an exaggeration of the tale of the Transcendents, but he would like to remain in history like them. Sitting at the table, the hero thought that his body too. Putting his hand to the book, he added that he was proof of the existence of transcendence. He had a sign. Smiling, Minato thought that he had sworn by this sign that he would leave his name in history just like the creators did. A view of the city opened. Drawing with chalk on the blackboard, the teacher turned. Standing at the blackboard, he said that he congratulated him on the passage. The man was holding the phone in his hands. The hero silently looked at the screen. Standing at the exit, the student said that they were going to celebrate the exam and have fun, because he would be able to clean up and take out the garbage. Symbols appeared on the board, and the protagonist thought that if they confirmed transcendence, then his name would be written on the board. This is how the hunter's exam goes, and he has been failing for 3 years. Holding the phone in his hands, he added that each person had 3 attempts at life. This was his last chance. Lowering his head, Minato thought that he would no longer become a hunter. Picking up the garbage, the hero said that his text was perfect. He even trained to increase the aura. Why the sign? Holding the jar in his hands, the protagonist asked that it was just a useless drawing. Yes. Tears appeared in Minato's eyes, and he said that he also wanted to become a hero, like the creators. Frowning, the student shouted that he should go to the school gate as soon as possible, to which the hero asked, and then said that he had forgotten himself. The guy walked forward. The thought arose that if success was possible for him, then he would be happy, just like him. The young man smirked when he heard the address, to which he replied that they should not exaggerate. The students glared at the hero angrily and shouted that he was too late. He would keep Mr. Kaisei waiting, to which he apologized. Taking a step forward, the guy asked that he was not intimidating the weak, to which the student objected. Grinning, he added that they could see reporters standing right behind him, to which the students apologized. The man closed his eyes and said that this is his alma mater. Let him turn around so that he can see better. They used this photo on the cover. Kaisei swung his sword. It was heard that, or how about the one where he cuts the dragon with his sword, to which he replied that it was a good photo. He was so embarrassed. Looking at the hunter, the hero thought that this man was Kaisei. 3 years ago he entered with him, a genius who was first in all disciplines. The young man struck with his foot. He swung his fist, and the protagonist thought that when they were in the same class, he was constantly bullying him. With his eyes wide open, Minato thought that they had spent the whole day interviewing him, and now he was talking about him. For what purpose and for what purpose? Smiling, the guy said that yes, there was a colleague whom he would like to introduce, and then whispered what his name was, and then pronounced the name of the hero. The hero opened his eyes in surprise when he heard that he did not have very good grades, and one day he turned to him, and he gave him time for advice and recommendations during his own training, to which the protagonist thought what he was talking about. His gaze froze when he heard that he was also supporting him financially. Holding the wallet in his hands, the guy said that he should not be deceived, even if he took the money from him. What a pity. The young man smiled and thought that he had never met such a loser before. The protagonist looked in amazement when he heard that. What a good story. He was a good person. Mr. Kaisei was really good in intelligence, technique, and appearance. Smiling, the hunter shouted that let them not switch. He would become a transcendent and leave his name in history. People began to take pictures of him, saying that they thank him very much for his kindness, whether he has words of gratitude to his mentor. The hero looked at him in amazement and mumbled. Standing next to him, the hunter asked what the exam was. He still did not pass the exam. Yes. Closing his eyes, Kaisei added that it was easy for him to pretend once. He did not want to end everything peacefully. The protagonist's memories appeared. Minato sighed heavily. Standing in front of the cameras, the hero said that he cared about him very much. Stretching out his hands to the sides, the guy said that so, they no longer have time. The protagonist opened his eyes wide when he heard that his rewards for studying there were cool. Raising his hand, the man asked what was going on, and what his name was. The guy with the interview had no idea. The protagonist froze upon hearing that no one was interested, to which he thought that no matter what he did, everything was bad. If they had the ability to become a hunter, they would definitely become one. Clenching his fist, he added that they didn't even remember the name. Frowning, Minato said that his name. He shuddered when he heard the address. Going forward, the student said that he should come to the mausoleum of the creators after school, to which the hero asked, and then thought what this meant, what he meant. Closing his eyes, Kaisei asked that he did not want to retake the exam. The protagonist looked at him in surprise and asked him what to retake the exam, to which the young man replied that he was using the help of the association. Standing in front of him, Minato asked why, to which the guy said, which was obviously for a strategy to improve his image. A mausoleum appeared. It was heard that the final phase is a photo shoot in the mausoleum. Well, when it is over, they will talk about it. Smiling, he added that he should definitely come. Looking at him, the hero thought that the retake of the exam was true. The young man walked forward, and the protagonist reflected on how he was angry, that he was using him to improve his image. No matter what, this was his chance. Minato grinned slightly. A mausoleum appeared, and he thought that this time the camera was aimed at the guy. It was heard that he would become the best hunter and promised to protect humanity from monsters in front of the mausoleum of the creators. And the photographer said that he looked like in the painting. Kaisei bowed when he heard that they ended the working day with a beautiful photo. Their contract for the day is over, thank you very much. To which he replied that he was waiting for a good article. The young man turned his head to the side. Going downstairs, he said what it was. Entering the room, Kaisei asked that they had found the entrance. Stretching out his hand to the side, the student replied that yes, this is it, to which the guy said that let them climb. He flinched when he heard the question of what they were doing. Standing with his back to the hero, the hunter said that he should just look and understand, this is a treasure hunt. Frowning, the hero shouted that what a treasure hunt, they are grave robbers, he at least understands who is here. Putting his hands in his pockets, the guy asked what and who was there. Suddenly he kicked the ground. Looking to the side, Kaisei asked if it was the smell of ancient mummies. The protagonist opened his eyes in amazement when he heard that the billionaire's belongings could be sold so that everyone would be in the black. What was the point of burying them with the body? These creators in the mausoleum were just garbage. Images of people appeared. The idea arose that the creators are amazing. Smiling, Minato thought that he, too, would someday leave his name in history. The hero gritted his teeth furiously. He rushed forward and exclaimed. The student deftly dodged his attack. The protagonist writhed in pain. Blood flew out of his mouth. Looking at him, the young man asked what he was talking to. Blood was spilled on the floor. The thought arose that this was death. Holding the backpack in his hands, the guy turned to the hunter. The jewelry was in the bag. I heard what it was. The hero opened his eyes in surprise. Smiling broadly, Kaisei said that this aura comes from the artifact itself. It's amazing. You can really live on it happily to death. To which the protagonist thought that he shouldn't touch the secret treasure. Damn the voice. Grabbing the hero by the clothes, the young man said that now he would explain so that even such a loser as him understood everything. He was looking for a person like him. The idiot had come here allegedly to retake the exam. The protagonist was reading a book, and someone said that he heard. He goes to the library of the mausoleum. He laughed when he heard it for the first time. He does not know if there is a joke funnier than this. Raising his hand in the air, Kaisei shouted that his dream of becoming a hunter had been cut short, and he had fallen into despair. The treasure of the creators he adored had been stolen, and his whereabouts were unknown. What tragedy was. Minato gritted his teeth and said that he was mocking. Holding the hero over the cliff, the guy said that the main news of tomorrow, the student was accused of stealing treasures from the mausoleum and escaping. He was put on the wanted list, a third-year student of the hunting school. Suddenly he threw it off and asked what his name was. The hero opened his eyes in fright. Smiling, the young man said that it didn't matter. The protagonist fell down, and he said goodbye to him. Falling into the water, Minato thought that everything would end here. Daily training, several exams, everything was in vain. He would die and disappear, as if he had achieved nothing and was not remembered in any way. Suddenly the hero opened his eyes in surprise. Images of people arose around him. Looking away, the protagonist thought that these people could fulfill his wish. They could do it. The man looked ahead. It was heard that they were sleeping in the mausoleum of the creators of the soul. Minato's eyes widened upon hearing this. A bright glow appeared around him, and he thought that he heard voices. This light, they were creators. The sign on the hero's hand lit up. It was heard that everything was in his hands. In his sky sign, there was no power itself, but with its help he could gain great power. Looking at the hero, the man said that he would have to make a contract with one of them and gain great power. Each of them was a master of his craft. The creators stretched their hands forward. It was heard that whoever he chooses, he will receive great power. While underwater, the protagonist wondered what kind of power he wanted. The guy smiled. The thought arose that he wanted this person. No, he didn't want to lose to anyone in the world. He needed overwhelming power. The mark on his hand lit up brightly, and Minato thought that he didn't want to be subjected to the humiliation he had before again. Looking at him, the girl said that he should decide which of them he chooses as soon as possible. Frowning, the hero shouted that he wanted their power. Let them give it to him. The creator lowered his head and said that he was greedy. He liked it, but it was impossible. No matter how strong he was, he couldn't master everything perfectly. A bright light appeared in front of them. They heard that he should be silent. The sign began to glow brighter and brighter, and the protagonist shouted that let him not say this. Let everyone give him power. Bright rays flew around him. A light appeared under the water, and someone said that there was so much power in this child. A bright pentagram appeared under the hero. The guy looked away. Suddenly the water flew up. Kaisei looked at him in bewilderment and asked again. The protagonist flew up. He descended to the ground. Minato stared angrily ahead. Standing in front of him, the student said that no, it couldn't be, that he got out, stubborn as a cockroach. The hero held a branch in his hands. Suddenly he waved at her, to which the guy asked what he was doing. The young man laughed loudly. Holding his stomach, the student asked that maybe he would try to beat them with a stick. It was scary. Standing behind them, Kaisei said okay. Opening his eyes wide, he added that he would not surface a second time, he would cut off his head. A weapon appeared in the hands of the guy. Smiling broadly, the student asked that he knew that he had the highest score in fencing in class. Let him be obedient and die. Lowering his head, the hero said that he had mastered the art of a master's sword. The young man swung his sword at him. Bright rays appeared in the air. The protagonist was behind the guy's back. Suddenly, cuts appeared on the young man's body. He wheezed in pain, and Minato asked what was in which place. The hunter opened his eyes in amazement. Holding a stick in his hands, the hero said that he should teach him. Wide-eyed, he added that he was swordsmanship, and then asked where his sword was, which he wielded. Gritting his teeth, the young man exclaimed, and then summoned a destructive gaze spell. Lightning appeared near the finger, and the protagonist said that it was too slow. He raised his eyebrows and used a lightning bolt. The young man writhed in pain. A bright beam struck the ground. The guy fell to the ground. Kaisei gritted his teeth tightly and thought that without the words of the spell, it was impossible to deal with people with one stick. The man looked ahead. The thought arose that a long time ago, with just one branch of a tree, the master of swordsmanship defeated an entire army, and reached the truth of magic. The girl turned around. It was said that a sorceress who could use all kinds of magic without words. In their time it is believed to be an exaggerated fairy tale. The Transcendents are attached to the mausoleum. The mark on his hand lit up brightly, and the thought arose that Minato's body was now inhabited by their souls. Images of people appeared, and the hero thought that their number was 106 people. The protagonist looked at the guy in disbelief, hearing that he would like to keep his name in history as a Transcendent. Standing in front of the hunter, Minato said that he would not leave his name. Frowning, he added that it would disappear forever, against the background of his history. They stood silently in front of each other. Holding a stick in his hands, the hero thought that cool, the souls of the founders and the sign of heaven. People were falling down, and he added that he was happy here. The protagonist lowered his gaze, listening to what kind of generosity. About 100 years had passed. From here to there would be his territory. His memory came into view, and Minato thought that he had been reading their biography from cover to cover, these founders whose souls were now in him. The creators were smiling. It was heard that so, after all. The eyes of the masters lit up. It was said that this was a competition who would get the body of a child. Crossing his arms, the man turned. The hero looked to the side and thought that it was the legendary swordsman Hinoki, who had slain an entire army with a single branch from a tree. Putting his hand to his face, the master said that as he thought, his name was preserved through descendants. Leaning on the protagonist's head, he asked what he was going to do now, to which Minato asked what he was talking about Kaisei. The guy clenched his teeth tightly when he heard that he should not talk about this weakling. Smiling, the swordsman said that he wanted to hear what he was going to do. The hero looked at him in amazement when he heard this. He took a step forward, to which the guy asked what kind of circus it was. Frowning, he shouted that he was A-level, he wasn't even worthy of watching. Suddenly, the protagonist punched him. The young man flew aside. Looking straight ahead, Minato said that he should go away. Dark particles appeared in the air. A bright glow flew out of the backpack. The hero froze in surprise. A view of the city opened. The monster ran swiftly forward. Looking at him, the man shouted. The man froze in front of the creature. The monster gritted his teeth tightly. Suddenly the master jumped up. He struck the monster with a bright beam. Smiling, the guy shouted that the A-rank monster had been killed in a second, as expected from an S-class hunter. The guy smiled. I heard that judging by the interview, it was probably nice to be called hope among young people. Talking about it, if he stood out, then the reputation of their guild would increase. They could have a drink, as the report would do. The man looked at the phone in fright. A purple glow appeared. The thought arose that it was a monster. What an aura. The hunter turned around in surprise. Crouching to the ground, the man mumbled. Kisaragi stood still, thinking that the pressure that prevented Class A and B subordinates from standing was an opponent of S rank or higher. People were lying on the ground. An alley of the city appeared. A view of the mausoleum opened. The young man clenched his teeth tightly. He looked at me in bewilderment. A monster appeared in front of the hero. Looking at him, Kaisei asked how he was, to which the protagonist replied that he had opened the mausoleum. The hunter frowned upon hearing that a monster had been sealed in this mausoleum to protect what was locked. The jewelry was in a bag, and Minato said that they had taken the artifacts. Smiling, the swordsman replied that it was true. Some of the monsters in the tower had escaped death by keeping their dormant skills. The monster stood still, and he added that it was a void bug. The creature's eyes widened, and its characteristics showed. The guy looked in amazement when he heard that a monster was killing several dozen people. Exudes a poisonous aura. It is an ordinary monster for their time. It seems that for today's youth it is a whole test. Rushing towards the forest, he shouted that he should run if he wanted to live, to which the hero replied that it was better not to move, otherwise the first thing to do. The creature looked away. Suddenly he rose up. The guy shouted in fright. Suddenly, the monster grabbed him. A memory appeared, and the young man thought that his sword had cut even the dragon. Kaisei's eyes widened. The monster began to suck the blood out of him, to which he shouted that he was in pain. Looking to the side, the protagonist replied that he had spoken. Embracing the hero, the swordsman asked what he would give his body for a while. Smirking, He added that he would watch how Hinoki's sword worked, and then thought that he would win. While the others were overboard, he would take control of this vessel. Looking straight ahead, the protagonist replied that he would not give up his body, to which the master replied that he should give it up as soon as possible. Standing behind him, the creators shouted that they wanted to escape, a good possibility, to which Hinoki replied that they should calm down. The craftsmen looked at them in surprise when they heard that if they borrowed, then they would all at once. Frowning, Minato said that he would surpass them, for sure. Looking at the monster, he thought that the power he wanted to reach and surpass, he wanted to see it, let them show it to him. The swordsman looked at him in bewilderment, and asked what he was talking about. The hero took out a weapon. It was heard that he was crazy. The protagonist raised his sword above his head. Frowning, Hinoki shouted that he was going. They swung their weapons sharply. The monster was cut into pieces. Minato looked at the stick. He took a fighting stance. Suddenly the hero struck. The monster's eyes opened in amazement. The hero abruptly grabbed the stick. He held it out in front of him. The protagonist did a somersault on the ground. The hero stretched his hand forward. The creature fell abruptly to the ground. His body flew up. Minato pointed his bow in his direction. Blood began to ooze from the monster. Looking at him, the hero heard a scream of pain. His eyes widened. The protagonist inflicted many blows on him. Minato crouched to the ground. Tentacles rushed towards the hero. His eyes widened. Bright lightning appeared around him. Suddenly the protagonist jumped up. Minato swung his weapon in mid-flight. Looking straight ahead, he used the Hinoki technique. Suddenly, the hero struck at the monster. A bright beam struck the ground. The creature was cut in half. The protagonist smiled broadly. The bird was sitting on a tree. She looked away. Holding the phone in his hands, the guy asked that he had already been defeated. He had to move here when a strong hunter was nearby. The bird was looking ahead, and someone said that there was a crow in the reflection. Smiling, the young man said that he had been killed by a schoolboy. Lowering his gaze, he added that he wanted to meet him. Midori smiled broadly. Sitting on the corpse of the monster, the guy said that we hadn't seen each other for a long time. Yes, this incident with an S-rank monster. No, it wasn't him. But the one his crows saw. This boy's name is Minato. He had failed the hunter exam 3 times. Holding the mug in his hands, he added that he could not even believe that he could not listen to him. A view of the city opened up. A question was heard that yesterday he was in order. Lowering his gaze, the disciple said that this aura was so strong, he couldn't even move, to which the young man replied that he was still not well. Smiling broadly, the student asked what he would say if he found out that he had killed him, to which the guy replied that it was impossible. It had been 10 years since anyone above S rank had appeared. The hero was standing in front of the monster. It was heard that this was only a rumor that a student had dealt with him. Stretching out his hand to the side, the disciple said that no, there were too few hunters in the whole world who could defeat him. Only one. The protagonist held on to a stick, and the guy added that he was clearly not at their school either. Looking to the side, he thought that the classroom had become the subject of conversation for the whole city. As he walked forward, the disciple said that he was out of the way. Looking to the side, he thought that killing S rank, he wasn't that bad, and Minato said that he couldn't get up. Memories from the battle appeared. The thought arose that yesterday he managed to defeat the monster. He gave his body to the creators. They almost tore it apart. Lying on the floor, the hero heard the question that he was okay. The swordsman smiled as he looked at him. Hinoki looked down and asked what he wanted to surpass the creators. The hero looked at him in bewilderment. Looking straight ahead, the protagonist said that he would surpass them, for sure. Clenching his fist, Minato replied approvingly. Sitting next to him, the swordsman said that he should show his determination, and the student wondered what was wrong with this guy. Looking to the side, Hinoki thought that even if you take it into account, there was a glow around the people, and he added that the level of modern transcendence is low. Turning his head, the master thought that ordinary people were so weak. If the tower collapsed again right now, then the world would be over. Suddenly he looked in amazement. A bright glow appeared around the person. Looking at the man, the hero asked what it was, to which the master replied that it was not, and then thought that at that moment, what a strange feeling. Leaving the office, the man shouted that he should go faster, to which the protagonist apologized for the delay. Memories appeared, and Minato thought that at school the exam was taken up to 3 times. He could no longer pass through hunter training schools. He would have to start again among ordinary people. The hero looked in amazement. Hearing that he was mistaken, there would be a grant. He would repeat the exam, to which he asked again. Stretching out his hand, the student asked that there would be a repeat of the exam for the hunter, to which he was answered approvingly. Crouching to the ground, the protagonist thought that he was not close to the ideal, so he needed to try. Smiling, the guy asked what they didn't know. This is a guy who dropped out of school. Let them feel sorry for the garbage that has been falling through for 3 years and give him a chance. Suddenly, Minato rushed forward. The young man looked surprised when he heard that the record was 1.2 seconds. The hero opened his eyes in surprise when he heard that 1 minute and 17 seconds. The protagonist did push-ups, and the examiner said that 840 times. Minato pressed the barbell, and someone shouted that 1,280 kilograms. The disciple looked at him in surprise and said that as this type, his results are twice as high as the previous records. The hero ran from side to side. With his eyes wide open, he thought that the creators were giving power again. Looking at him, the swordsman wondered if they could help in any way. They probably didn't do anything. The school corridor appeared. It was heard that the current record was for Minato. Looking at the tablet, the guy said that thank you very much, a great record. Wiping the sweat from his face, the man said that when he received a request to retake the exam, he was very surprised. Of course, his physical capabilities are impressive. However, Midori looked down when he heard that the problem was the number of attempts. He had already had 3 surrenders and failed everywhere. Particles appeared in the air. It was heard that, in other words, there were no magical powers. Sitting on the couch, the director said that he thought it was definitely a waste of time. Standing next to the guy, the girl said that this is a child. Smiling, Midori said he would take a look. Standing in front of the mill, the hero heard that he didn't know how to measure it. Let him spin this mill with magic for 30 seconds, and the number of revolutions would be his result. Stretching his hands, the protagonist thought that in the past 3 years, no matter how much he tried, the mill had never moved. He had never even felt anything like magical power, let alone manipulated it. Closing his eyes, he added that he understood now. A glow appeared around the hero. The thought arose that this cycle rises from the toes of the right foot, goes all over the body and returns back to the toes of the right foot. From this flow the breath is lost. A glow appeared from the palm of his hand. Looking at the laptop, the examiner shouted about the beginning. A blue light appeared around the blades. The hero began to rotate the rotor. Suddenly it began to spin at an incredible speed. Bright rays appeared in the air. The counter was rapidly gaining momentum. The man crouched and thought that he could not keep track of the numbers. Suddenly, a powerful explosion broke out. The rotor flew to the side. He was flying towards the school. The man exclaimed in amazement. The school was hit. The director shuddered in fright. He froze with fright. Sitting on the couch, the guy laughed and said that he looked a lot like him. Smiling, he added that the two of them would be in history. The protagonist opened his eyes in amazement. Adjusting his glasses, the man shouted that the hunter's exam had been passed. The students exclaimed with joy and shouted that he had made new records in all disciplines. Minato stretched his hand forward. Clenching his fist, he thanked them, and then thought that he still had power. The swordsman crossed his arms and thought that he knew it. Memories appeared. The thought arose that the creators had borrowed his body, thereby awakening the potential inside the guy. Smiling broadly, Hinoki said that a person with a sky sign could be ordinary. He was worth the weight of several hundred years. Interesting. The hero clenched his fist tightly, and the man thought that if this guy coped, perhaps they would be able to make all their desires come true. Suddenly, the protagonist looked at him in surprise. A bright light appeared in front of him. Covering his face with his hand, he asked about the explosion. The man was surrounded by a bright light, and the swordsman thought that this was what he felt this morning. Closing his eyes, the young man apologized. Gritting his teeth, Minato thought it was Midori. The young man smiled, and the hero reflected on the fact that a modern legend, the strongest Transcendent, why he was here. After shaking the hero's hand, the guy said that he watched his exam, congratulated him on passing the exam for a hunter, to which the protagonist thanked him and thought what his name was. Closing his eyes, the hunter said that so, the additional exam, let's call it so, the strongest in the world, will climb this pedestal together. Minato looked at him in surprise and asked again. The guy stood in front of the monster. It was said that as a transcendent hunter he had been working for 9 years. He was the strongest in the world. He had no equal. Midori was smiling. The thought arose that 1,000 monsters were turning to dust because of him. Weak monsters he could only destroy with his gaze. He had sealed the 10,000 demon temple 10 years ago and stopped the outbreak on Kyushu 5 years ago. A living singularity. The hero looked to the side when he heard the address. The swordsman smiled broadly and said that he should give him his body at once. Raising his hand up, Midori said that the rules were simple. He gave him a minute. If he hit him even once, he won. Closing his eyes, he added that there were no consequences. If he lost, he would attack every 10 seconds. The protagonist looked in amazement when he heard that. Let him not worry. He would not respond to his blows. He could use his abilities. Stretching his hand forward, Midori said that he had prepared a weapon for him, could use what he was good at. Minato's eyes widened and asked again. Looking at the guy, he thought that an additional exam. What was going on? With Midori, even 1 minute was a difficult test. The young man smiled when he heard that it was okay for him to use a weapon, to which he replied that it was fine. His body was actually stronger than it was to be told by appearance. Looking straight ahead, the hunter said that he could cut any sword. The hero froze when he heard that he should give him a seat. Clenching his fist, the swordsman shouted that such an opponent had only seen in his time, to which the protagonist thought that he could sense Hinoki's agitation. The young man looked at the phone, and Minato added that it was still very strong, since the creator was interested. Looking away, the hero thought that he had a chance to win. The protagonist sighed heavily. He knitted his brows. Standing at the window, the students shouted that something was about to fight Midori. Looking at the hero, the swordsman shouted what he was doing. Let him give up his body as soon as possible. Pulling the phone forward, the guy said that they were starting. Minato held the weapon in his hands. He rushed forward abruptly. Swinging the weapon, the hero heard that he was going to fight it himself, to which the protagonist thought that he knew that it was reckless. However, gritting his teeth, he added that he wanted to remain in history. With their help, not thanks to them, he needed to do it himself. Minato swung his weapon sharply. Dodging the blows, the hunter asked what was on social networks. I am sure their video will soon go viral. The students looked at me in amazement. It was heard that he should quickly film on his phone. How cool Midori is. The hero struck a lot of blows. The young man smiled as he looked at him. The protagonist gritted his teeth furiously. It sounded that this could not be. Wide-eyed, the student said that something was wrong, Minato's constant attacks. The hunter dodged the attacks, and he asked how long it would last. The hero raised his sword above his head. The guy lowered his gaze. The thought arose that the blows were diagonal. They were shortened, obliquely from the side, on the shin. Waving his weapon, the protagonist thought of the trachea. With his eyes wide open, he thought about what was amazing. His body moved easily. No matter what he did, it didn't get tired. Memories appeared, and Minato thought that it was because he had loaned the body to the creators. His body had indeed changed. The guy touched his forehead. He pulled on the crack and said 10 seconds. The hero looked away in amazement. The protagonist dodged his blow. He froze in bewilderment. A slam mark appeared on the ground, and Minato thought what kind of light it was. If it had touched his head, it would have exploded. Midori looked at his hand. Looking straight ahead, he wondered what was strange. He couldn't believe he had made a mistake with the amount of power he was supposed to have. The hero held the weapon in his hands, and the hunter added that he did not feel any threat from it. With his eyes wide open, the protagonist thought that at this rate he would be killed. Frowning, he added that he thought it was time for him to be strong. Minato grabbed the weapon with both hands. The guy opened his eyes in surprise and exclaimed. The hero swung his weapon sharply. The students looked at him in surprise. It was heard that he had sharply increased his speed. The hunter dodged the blows, and the student shouted that he was not even visible on camera. Dodging the blows, Midori thought that he was faster than before. The protagonist looked angrily, and the young man thought that the sword that killed a monster above S-class, the atmosphere had changed. Whether there were any conditions for activating its power, was keeping the trump card a secret. A timer appeared on the phone. Wide-eyed, the young man thought that this time. Dodging the blow, he added that it was as if he had wings. The hunter curled his fingers. Suddenly he struck a blow at the hero. The protagonist flew into the wall. Blood flew out of his mouth. Standing in front of the hunter, Minato thought that it would be amazing, the strongest transcendent in the world, if he had been subjected to this attack yesterday. Smiling broadly, he added that there would be nothing left of him. Cool, he had become stronger. The hero's head began to spin. The thought arose that but with his current powers, he could not pass the Midori test. The protagonist rushed forward, thinking that, but still, he was completely devoted to the fight until the time ran out. Minato ran past the guy. Suddenly he opened his eyes in surprise. Lowering his gaze, the hunter said that he should forgive. He already understood everything. 30 seconds. Midori slapped him in the back. The hero furrowed his brows. Holding the phone in his hands, the guy thought that he could feel his talent, but he wasn't good enough for his buddies. The protagonist struck the monster. The thought arose that the power at that moment, after all, he did not see it. Smiling, the hunter said that they were returning. He expected more. Minato clutched the weapon in his hands. The young man looked at him in surprise when he heard that he was disappointed in him. Smiling broadly, the swordsman said that this imp was too stubborn. He could finally use his body. Standing in front of the hunter, the protagonist turned. Midori looked at him in surprise when he heard that they would have more fun. Minato smiled broadly. The hero looked at his body in amazement. The hunter smiled, looking ahead. Memories appeared. The thought arose that he had felt his presence before, but had been mistaken in his power. A glow appeared around the person. It was said that this is another person. He has new abilities. No matter what, they are huge. He has turned into a monster. Striking a blow, the hero shouted that he should not be distracted. Wide-eyed, Midori thought that his abilities had changed. His speed and strength were incomparable. He was a swordsman. Suddenly he looked away in amazement. The protagonist struck him. The hunter deftly dodged the attack. He froze in surprise. Minato swung his weapon furiously. The young man dodged his blow. The students bounced back from the blow. The guy looked at the phone. The thought was different from their previous fight, in which he could foresee his every blow. He became an experienced swordsman who seemed to know what the opponent should avoid. A waterfall appeared, and the hunter thought that the flow of water, no, it was like a sword formed by a waterfall. Lowering his hand, the young man said that he could indeed defeat the S rank. Waving his hand, he added 40 seconds. Smiling broadly, the hero replied that he would win. Suddenly he struck the ground. The guy looked at me in surprise and said that it was excellent. The students opened their eyes in amazement. It was heard that it was impossible. He did not believe it. Midori defended himself. Holding a weapon in his hands, the protagonist shouted that it was boring. Let him cast aside his doubts and attack. Frowning, he added that he shouldn't pretend to lick his lips if he wasn't going to eat. Suddenly, Minato rushed towards the hunter. Wide-eyed, the young man said that he understood. The fragment bounced to the side. A glow appeared around him. Weapons began to rain down from the air. The hero looked up in surprise. The young man jumped up after the weapon. He smiled as he held the spear in his hands. Looking at him, Minato shouted that he should come over. Looking at the battle, the disciple said that it was cool. People fought in the air. The man gripped the weapon tightly. The guy was holding a spear in his hands. They looked at each other. The swordsman frowned, and a question was heard asking if the cypress was blooming. The girl looked up and said that she wanted to fight this guy face to face, and the old man added that it looked funny. The hero was holding on to the stick, and it was heard that the body of the transcendent boy they were using was not ready yet. The mage looked up, hearing that he should also join. Let him stop, it's not cool. The protagonist watched the fight. Minato brandished his weapon. Waving his arms, the hero said that he should dodge, to the right, not to the left. Opening his eyes wide, he added that to jump from below, to shift the center of gravity. The weapon broke in half. Gritting his teeth, The protagonist shouted that damn, a stupid blade. Smirking, the hunter wondered what was fine. He wasn't bored. Who else could excite him so much? And Minato thought that the blades had run out. Use firearms. Or. The hunter raised his eyebrows and shouted that there were 10 seconds left. What to do? The hero looked away. He jumped up sharply. The student looked at him in amazement and asked again. The protagonist snatched the weapon from him and said that he was annoying. Midori jumped up. He swung his fist. A crushing explosion thundered. Minato flew rapidly in the air. The young man dodged his blows. Looking at them, the student said that the school was collapsing. The hero jumped up after the hunter. Midori grabbed the rotor. He gripped it tightly in his hands. The protagonist looked at him in fright. The guy swung with the rotor in his hands. His eyes widened. The hunter looked at him in surprise when he heard the name. A blue grid appeared. Minato swung his sword. He used the technique of disintegrating cubes. The master smiled and shouted that it was wonderful. Gritting his teeth, the hero replied that let him bite it. Suddenly he froze in bewilderment. The hunter began to strike. His gaze froze and he said 60 seconds. The guy rushed towards the hero. Frowning, the swordsman shouted that he was not done yet. The protagonist took him by the shoulder. He rushed forward abruptly. Minato looked at his opponent carefully. They touched each other's hands. The hero deftly dodged his blow. People looked at me in amazement. Raising his hand up, the protagonist shouted that he was alone. Smiling, he added that it was one blow. Minato struck the hunter. The guys looked at each other angrily. Memories from the battle appeared. It was said that the battle of extremes, it seemed to be an endless series of defense and attack. A battle for the only correct answer. A game of Segas between masters in which no one could interfere. Looking at the screen, the swordsman said that it was a type of imp. The hero waved his hand. The thought arose that for a moment, only for a moment, he was also possible. This guy also felt it. The master smiled broadly and thought that an uncharted path had opened up to him. The protagonist struck at the hunter. He opened his eyes in amazement. Midori grabbed his arm. He held his fist in front of his face. Gritting his teeth, Minato thought that damn it, he didn't pass. The hunter grinned slightly. He put his hand to his face. Smiling, the hunter said that he had passed. They suddenly collapsed to the ground. The students watched from the window. It was heard that the battle was over. The young man held the hero in his arms and said that he should return. Closing her eyes, the girl asked what happened, to which he replied that he could not pass by an interesting boy. He needed to heal his arm. To which Rin replied that she understood. The student looked at him in bewilderment and asked what he had won, in what way. The hero opened his eyes wide when he heard that it was cool. This guy was able to punch Midori. Sitting next to him, Rin said that she would heal her arm now, not a difficult job, to which the protagonist apologized. Smiling, she added that she congratulated her on passing the exam. Closing his eyes, Minato thanked her and then asked again. He abruptly stood up and asked why he had hit Midori. Lying next to him, the guy said that it was a pity that he did not remember this. Lowering his head, he added that he had given a little indulgence, surrendered and passed. The hero looked to the side after hearing that a series of central attacks, to which he thought it was Hinoki. The hunter struck a blow, but his last attack was the strongest. Smiling, he said that it was wonderful. Let him be proud of himself. The protagonist looked at him in surprise. Sitting on the ground, he apologized. Turning his head, Minato asked what if he had passed, then what now? The girl looked away and asked again. The guy smiled and asked again. The hero looked at him in bewilderment. A destroyed school appeared. A view of a residential building opened. The chicken was fried in batter. Looking to the side, the woman asked how many guests they had. Holding the rag in his hands, the protagonist replied that he did not know, maybe they were alone, to which she asked what it was. Closing her eyes, the mother said that today was a good day. Besides passing the exams, it was unbelievable that Midori had noticed it. She took the rice with a spoon. Minato smiled when he heard that she believed he could do it if he tried, to which he replied approvingly. Lowering her gaze, the woman said that but she was not sure that such a famous person could come to their house. Their house was more like a dog kennel. To which the hero shouted that Midori was not that kind of person. Lying on the bed, the protagonist sighed. Holding the business card in his hands, he wondered what he had said then. Lying on the floor, the guy shouted that let him let go, it hurt. Rina frowned when she heard that didn't he say that if he won, he would join them, and the hero said that he doesn't remember. Looking at the disciples, Midori said that there were many people here. Looking at the hero, the hunter asked that they could come to his house today, where he would tell in more detail. Smirking, he added that he would give him a choice whether or not to fight a common enemy. The protagonist looked at him in surprise and thought that he was a common enemy. The creators fought. There was an idea that the founders sealed the tower. The task of the hunters is now to destroy the monsters that crawl out of the interdimensional rifts. Looking straight ahead, Minato wondered what else had happened. Frowning, the swordsman shouted that he should wake up. Looking at him, the hero turned. The creators stood in front of him. He heard why they were all here. Lying on the floor, the protagonist heard that they had just finished the discussion, to which he asked again. Frowning, Minato said that it was impossible. They had decided who would take his body. Looking at him, the master replied that it was something like that. The hero opened his eyes in surprise. Going down the stairs, he said that he should forgive me. Midori apparently came. Going around the corner, the protagonist thought that why earlier. Suddenly he froze in bewilderment. The woman was lying on the floor. After looking at her, Minato turned. Suddenly he rushed forward. The hero opened his eyes wide. The man was taking the chicken with his hands. The protagonist looked at him in surprise. Sitting at the table, he said that it was delicious. Empty dishes appeared. It was heard that his mother had made a mistake with the meat, wanted to serve the guests, then let her serve expensive meat. Standing in front of the kitchen, Minato asked who he was, what was wrong with his mother, to which he was asked that he was so polite. Sticking out his tongue, Haitani introduced himself and said that he had come to pick up an S-class hunter, a friend of Midori's. Sitting at the table, the man asked that he would pack his suitcases as soon as possible, their home. Suddenly a fist rushed in his direction. The hero struck a blow at a stranger. The man smiled broadly and laughed. Looking down, he asked that he wanted to fight. The protagonist lowered his head down. The mother was lying on the floor. She hugged the hero. The thought arose that when his father died, his mother raised him alone. Smiling, the woman said that she could still wear them. It would be better to buy him new sneakers. Closing her eyes, she added that well done, that he was also working today. She would cook his beloved tonkatsu. Frowning, Minato said that his mother, what he had done to her, let him answer. Looking at the screen, the swordsman asked that an S-rank opponent was just right. Although he was annoyed that he was copying Midori, this battle would clear things up. Smiling, he asked what would be done to him. A glow appeared around the hero. The protagonist stood in front of a man. Smiling broadly, Haitani said that he was angry. How cute. Suddenly he waved his hand. Minato stared at him silently. The hero grabbed the man's hand. He threw it abruptly to the floor. The old man looked at him in surprise. Memories appeared, and he thought it was his movement. A view of the windows in the house opened. Suddenly, a man flew out of the window. The protagonist was walking towards him. Gritting his teeth, the man asked. Memories from the battle appeared, and Haitani wondered that he had seen the video of the battle with Midori. Wasn't he just wielding an aura and a sword? Taking a step forward, Minato said that as expected, he was stronger than A rank. Frowning, he added that he should answer the question at once. Looking straight ahead, the hero asked what he had done to his mother. The woman was unconscious. Smiling broadly, the man asked that how could he not know if he could see everything. Sticking out his tongue, he shouted that it was poison. He put her to sleep because she was nervous. Narrowing his eyes, Haitani said that if she was unlucky, there might be some consequences. Standing in front of him, the protagonist said that he did not understand. The man exclaimed in bewilderment. He took a step forward when he heard why he would harm his fellow human beings, to which he asked again. Haitani looked up and laughed. Waving his hand, he said that he was an idiot. The protagonist dodged his attack. As he struck, Haitani said that they were not brothers. Let him not move, he would become his plaything. He seemed so sweet. Since he was holding something valuable to him hostage, he would listen to him. Minato opened his eyes in surprise. The man stepped on his foot. Waving his hand, he asked again. The hero slid on the ground. Frowning, he wondered why his cheeks were burning. A spot appeared on his face. Smiling, Haitani said that he should come up. Frowning, he added that he had the ability to hold 1,000 poisons inside him. A view of the buildings opened up. It was heard that it was a difficult task. If he wanted, he could fill the air within a radius of 5 kilometers with poisonous gas, although in the city it would be problematic. Looking at him, the protagonist thought that the poison was in him for only a minute. If he found out the composition, then he could come up with an antidote, otherwise he would die. Haitani smiled broadly, and Minato thought that a poisonous gas within a radius of 5 kilometers was S rank. As a person it could be compared to a disaster. The hero's face began to be covered with spots. The girl looked surprised when she heard that the Queen of Medicine, for sure, was inside him. She opened her eyes wide when she heard that she should tell me how to carry out the detoxification process, to which the girl replied approvingly. Stretching out his hand, Haitani asked if he had said something, or if he had been consumed by the fear of death. Dodging his attack, the protagonist spoke about the skill. The old man opened his eyes in amazement. Memories came to him, and he thought that this guy was imitating his techniques after seeing it just once. The swordsman smiled when he heard about his skill. The girl held a spear in her hands. The master was sitting on the ground. The hero smiled. It was heard that again. He had read their biographies so many times that he could retell any at any time. He admired the creators, and now they are inside him. The man looked at me in bewilderment and asked again. Clenching his fist, the protagonist said that he had no reason to be afraid of him. He did not like it. Haitani frowned angrily. With his eyes wide open, he shouted that it was good. Even if he wasn't trembling with fear, wouldn't it hurt him? Rushing forward, the master added that the next poison was so strong that he would beg for death. Minato rushed to the side. Smoke appeared around the tree. Waving his hand, Haitani shouted that if he knelt, he would give him the antidote. But he would not return to his sanity after this pain. The hero froze against the wall. He stared ahead silently. A glow appeared around him. The protagonist struck the man. Blood flew out of the man's mouth. The creator looked in surprise. The man flew into the pole. A blow flew sharply across his face. Minato struck with his foot. The girl's eyes widened. Haitani slid across the ground. The hero rushed in his direction. He waved his hand in his direction. The protagonist touched it with his hand. Minato struck an opponent. The maker silently watched the battle. The hero struck. The dinosaur looked happily. The protagonist grabbed the man. The guy crossed his arms when he heard his name. Suddenly, Minato threw the man up. Flying in the air, he thought what was the reason for this guy. Rolling his eyes, the man reflected that no matter who he was, his poison could make anyone terrified. His nervous system was damaged. The boy should not move freely. The hero raised his head up. The mage opened her eyes in surprise. Lightning appeared around the hero's hand. A bright glow appeared in the sky. The creators watched the fight in surprise. Smiling, the swordsman asked what he saw. A memory from the battle appeared, and he added that this guy had only hit the strongest one once, and he was just lending them his body and following their movements. He was not afraid of exercise or magic. Maybe it was because of the emblem of the sky. Frowning, Hinoki asked what wasn't exciting. Looking at the screen, he heard that he needed to pick it up, to which the master said that if he trained with the creators. The hero held his mother in his arms. It was heard that he would become an unprecedented monster. The man rushed forward and shouted that they should move. Flying in the air, he added that it was necessary to protect the guy who fought Midori. 15 organizations were already working. Turning around, the guy shouted that they could not be late. Looking at him, Midori asked why there were so many of them. He smiled and added that there were 15 of them. Stretching his hand forward, the young man said that they were the last. The man looked at the glow in amazement. The beam flew across the roof of the building. Holding the phone in his hands, the master turned to Rin. Looking to the side, the girl said that she was there. There were no signs of transcendental people around. Standing on the roof of the building, she objected. Midori looked surprised to hear that it looked like someone had overtaken them. Looking down, Rin said that an S-rank hunter using poisons, he got to him. The man was lying on the roof. It was heard that he was now defeated. He was unconscious. Closing his eyes, the hunter asked. After clapping, he shouted that it was just wonderful. He didn't think that he would deal with it. He would never have thought that he would be able to defeat an S-rank hunter. The hero looked to the side, hearing that everything was fine with him. He was not poisoned, to which he replied approvingly. The woman was lying on the sofa. It was heard that he and his mother were safe. She was unconscious. Crossing his arms, Hinoki asked how safe it was. Without Valentine, they would both have already died, to which Hinoki replied that she was tired. The hero smiled. It was heard that he managed to do it in 5 seconds. Well, there was a man who synthesized a serum from his poison. A video appeared, and Midori said that he should forgive him. He was late. In the afternoon, he saw a video that said that many organizations were targeting him. Stretching his hand forward, the protagonist asked that the fact that this guy was his acquaintance was a lie, to which the guy replied that of course, a lot of people lie on his behalf. Rin closed her eyes upon hearing the question that she was done, to which she replied approvingly. The house appeared. It was heard that she had finished repairing the fence and walls. Turning around, the master said that it was good, and then asked that they would talk again. Minato's eyes widened in surprise when he heard about his future. The birds were sitting on a power line. Standing in front of the hero, the mother asked that everything was fine, he had not forgotten anything, took the wallet, and where was the charger? To which the hero replied that everything was fine, he was ready. They looked at each other. People were sitting at the table. I heard that he was Midori. Closing his eyes, the guy said that yes, he had a very talented son, let him leave him to them. He would like him to become a great hunter. Smiling, the protagonist shouted that it was cool if Midori had chosen him. The woman looked down. Holding the package in her hands, she asked that it was his lunch. He had not yet eaten breakfast. He could throw it away or put it in a container, to which Minato replied approvingly. He looked down silently. Sitting at the table, the mother said that there were many dangers. Looking at her, the master replied approvingly. Closing her eyes, the woman said that this child admires the legendary creators. He has always dreamed of reaching their level. She looked at her son. She heard that it was a great honor to receive such an offer, but as a parent, she was worried. Placing his hands on the table, Midori said that contingencies were a normal part of their job. Nothing could be said for sure. Looking straight ahead, he added that Minato would therefore train to become stronger and more resilient, no worse than the creators themselves. Looking at him, the mother turned. Sitting behind the wheel, the girl asked that he was glad. After all, he had made a promise. Indeed, he did not know what would happen next. The young man looked in the mirror. Raising her finger up, the mother said that he should not sleep with a bare belly. He easily catches a cold, to which the hero replied that he was already an adult, and she added that he should wash colored clothes separately. The hunter's gaze froze and he said that he would keep his promise as much as possible. As he was leaving, the hero said that so, the time had come. Turning around, he added that he was going. His mother looked at him in silence. The protagonist got into the car, and she turned. Smiling, the woman said that she should return for the new year. Minato opened his eyes wide and said that he should definitely wait for him. Mother waved after the car. Sitting in front, the young man asked that everything was fine, to which the hero replied approvingly. Grinning, he added that the longer he looked at his mother's face, the more his resolve weakened. Closing his eyes, Midori replied that that's right, they have a long road ahead of them. Maybe they can eat or sleep, for example. The protagonist looked at the package. Looking at its insides, he thought it was bento. Minato opened the box. Suddenly he opened his eyes in surprise. In the container there was a chicken with rice. The inscription on the chicken appeared. The hero's memories appeared. Lowering his head, the hero thanked her. Tears appeared in his eyes. The girl stared ahead silently. The young man smiled and closed his eyes. The car drove forward. A view of the mountains opened up. The protagonist opened his eyes wide and shouted that he was here. Smiling, Midori said that he was welcome. The gates opened, and it was heard that it was a national organization, to which only a handful of outstanding personalities were allowed to belong. A view of the building opened, and the guy said that a detachment of opposing fighters were taking countermeasures in this main headquarters. Minato looked at me in surprise and said that countermeasures. A man was standing at the window. Turning around, he said that he should come in. Standing near the table, the guy said that he was new. Closing her eyes, the girl asked what he was saying about the increase in synchronization. The young man smiled and said that he was glad that they would have a new friend. Standing at the window, the man said that he needed to check it first. Frowning, he added that he was really suitable for countermeasures. The hero froze in surprise. A view of the building opened. It was heard that a detachment of opposing fighters from the main department. The protagonist opened his eyes wide and asked what was here. It was the Midori Guild. Looking straight ahead, the girl said that she should forgive me for the late explanation. Minato froze when he heard that they couldn't explain to him in front of his mother because it was a state secret, to which he asked again, and the boy said that he now knew. Standing by the car, Midori said that he could leave the luggage in the dormitory for the time being, to which Rin replied that she would, and the hero added that he would carry it himself. He shuddered when he heard that he should wait. Flying up, the man shouted that he should explain himself. The protagonist blocked the man's blow. Smiling, the young man shouted that the attack from the front would do. Gritting his teeth, Minato thought he was strong and then asked who it was. The hero slid on the ground and exclaimed. Bowing, the guy said that first of all, let him introduce himself. Hitohara smiled and said that he was a member of the resistance and his age, to which the protagonist wondered that he had indeed introduced himself. Placing his hand on his side, Midori asked if he could have tea, to which Rin replied approvingly. Minato struck the guy. Gritting his teeth, he asked what was why. As he struck, Hitohara shouted that he obviously wanted an explanation about resistance, and they were testing his strength. The hero frowned and asked again. The young man jumped up. The protagonist crossed his arms. Hitohara unleashes a kick. With a wink, he said that they would start with the basics of the resistance squad. Minato slid across the ground and thought that he was really going to fight and explain at the same time. Smiling, the young man asked for his name. Frowning, the hero introduced himself. Midori held the cup in his hands. The memories of the protagonist appeared. It was heard that but he had already been checked at school, past the S rank. Now he is being checked again. Standing next to him, Rin heard that they were checking again, so he thought, to which she replied that there was nothing she could do. Looking at the sparring, the girl said that he had brought a talented person. Jumping up, Hitohara shouted that they would listen to him. It was the job of a hunter. Frowning, the protagonist replied that monsters are still coming out of the crack of the bashi, and they need to be fought. Raising his thumbs up, the guy said that it was true. Sliding along the ground, he added that the classification depends on the destruction of monsters, however. Minato looked in surprise when he heard what about the other disasters. Wide-eyed, he asked what other disasters were. Looking at him, the young man said that yes, there are other catastrophes in the world, for example, an interdimensional rift, which is much worse than just monsters. Monsters were standing around the palace. It was heard that 10 years ago the Manhwa temple. The zombies walked forward, and the guy said that 5 years ago there was an incident in Kyushu. Minato froze in surprise and asked that this was an interdimensional rift. The blow flew in his direction. Kicking him with his foot, the hunter shouted that it was true. The hero gritted his teeth when he heard that this was what they were taught in the guilds, according to society. He looked at him in surprise when he heard that, however. Jumping up, the young man said that in fact. Frowning, he shouted that they were mistaken. Hitohara sliced the tree in half. A view of the sky opened up. The protagonist looked at him. Looking to the side, the young man said that they were stopping acts of invasion from another world. Monsters appeared. It sounded like 300 years ago with the Tower of Strangers, so as not to have a huge disaster. Frowning, Minato asked that it was the same as with the tower, that is, the invasion was not stopped. Hands stretched out in his direction, and it was heard that someone from another world was still trying to get into this world. Taking a step forward, Hitohara said that the reason was unknown, but that the Transcendents had become weaker since the events of the tower, and there were almost no Transcendents left in their time, to which Hitohara asked what to do. Smiling broadly, the hunter said that was why they were there. Raising his leg, he added that those who predict and prophesy events, in order to prevent a catastrophe, only the best can follow this path. Looking straight ahead, Hitohara said that it was them, the opponents too. Midori smiled when he heard this. The protagonist froze and repeated a few words. Standing in front of him, the hunter said that from today he was one of them. He was able to withstand his blows, and from now on, his partner. Stretching his hand forward, he added that he welcomed him. Welcome to the opponents. They shook hands. Turning around, Hitohara shouted that so, he introduced them to Minato. A man was standing on the roof. People looked down. The question was heard what they would do. The hunters watched the hero. Suddenly they evaporated. It was heard that they were disappearing, just like villains. Closing his eyes, Hitohara said that it was a pity. Apparently they weren't convinced until they checked for themselves if he was on him now, to which Midori replied that he was relying on him then. Going to the door, the guy said that he would show his room in the dormitory, take half of the luggage, to which the hero thanked him. A crescent moon appeared in the sky. Sitting on the bed, the protagonist sighed. Lowering his head, he thought that the world catastrophe was the organization that prevented them. Looking down, Minato added that the creators have teamed up to crush the tower, and it is possible that the same disaster they are trying to prevent will occur, whether he can fight. Putting his hand to his head, the hero said that for some reason he began to worry, to which he was told that it was time to train. The protagonist looked surprised to hear this. The swordsman crossed his arms. Standing in front of the hero, he said that he had forgotten to say since he was confused. Now he will say what they, as creators, have decided. Looking at him, Minato heard that they would make him the strongest Transcendent. Images of people appeared. It was heard that they would also defeat that guy Midori. They would give him the power of the strongest Transcendent in history. The hero froze when he heard that he should become a student of the creators. Sitting on the bed, the protagonist asked. The swordsman looked away after hearing why. Didn't it happen when they possessed his body? To which he replied that well, that's fine, but in the future. The creator's eyes lit up. It was heard that they would fight for him. To which Minato thought that it was a battle between the founders, and then shouted that there was no need to fight for him. The hero froze when he heard that this was the original intention, but after looking at him, they changed their minds. Lowering his gaze, the master said that it would be more interesting in the future. The creators looked at the protagonist. Minato opened his eyes in amazement when he heard that it was more to look at his height than to use his body. Smiling, Hinoki said that he had defeated that type with poisons. The man stretched his hand forward. Memories appeared. It seemed that he had imitated techniques that he had seen only once. The hero struck blows, and the master said that even in comparison with them, the power and accuracy are amazing. Now he is taking shape. The protagonist froze, hearing that he understands how strong he will be. A symbol appeared on his hand, and the swordsman said that he didn't know if it was an effect of a sky sign, but smiling broadly, he added that this was his ability to assimilate. This gift was better than that of any of the creators. Minato sat on the bed. He began to cry. The thought occurred that tears involuntarily flowed down his face. The man put his hand to his face and thought. Sitting at the table, he said that he did not have an ounce of talent. The protagonist gritted his teeth tightly, and thought that no one had expected anything from him until now. Raising his leg, the student said that he was garbage that did not deserve anything. Holding the phone in his hands, the student said that he had failed the hunter exam all 3 times. The man smiled and said that he should finally give up. People were walking forward. They heard what his name was, but who needed him? Smiling, the guy asked what his name was, and Minato thought that no one believed that he would be able to change his future. The hunter closed his eyes and said that he had a great talent. The swordsman looked down and said that he was the strongest Transcendent in history. He had such a talent. Sitting on the bed, the hero wondered if he was okay. He began to cry and added that there was nothing happy in his life, so why was this happening? The protagonist looked at the books. The thought arose that he admired, longed to learn more from them. The creators stood in front of him. Minato grinned slightly. Hugging the hero, the master said that he should not cry. The creators stood at attention when they heard that they were with him. People raised their heads up, and Hinoki said that while his body was asleep, it was possible to use that time in their time and space. Looking down, he added that from now on, he would train for 10 hours every day. Midori smiled. It was heard that at noon there was a meeting with the opponents. The hero took a step forward when he heard that it was night. Standing in front of the creators, he heard that he would train with them. Standing at the window, the protagonist said that he was not used to it yet, to which the guy replied that he understood. It was also in the first days in the dormitory. Looking at the protagonist, he pondered. Minato held the cup in his hands. Haitohara's eyes widened. Suddenly he struck with his foot. The hero smiled and said that it was still morning. Let him not do so. It was better to eat first. The young man looked at me in bewilderment and asked again. Closing his eyes, the protagonist said that it seemed to him that yesterday he struck faster than now. People were sitting in the dining room. Holding the tray in his hands, the hunter said that it was best to eat together. A plate of fruit appeared. The girl closed her eyes when she heard that they could get hooked. Turning his head, Haitohara said that he should sit here. Looking straight ahead, Minato thought he had talked about her the day before. Frowning, the girl said that he was new here, to which the hero thought that the atmosphere had changed a lot. Smiling, he said that he was glad to meet him, and then introduced himself. Closing her eyes, the girl replied that she did not know, and did not want to know, and would not remember. Holding the fork in her hands, she added that if she distinguished herself, then she would remember his name. Smiling, the hunter said that let her learn. Now she will go to prevent damage, so let him follow her. An all-terrain vehicle rides in the snow. The first book of prophecies discovered, 1945, Antarctica, 3,000 meters deep under the ice. The hooded man looks inquiringly. The man holds a book in his hand and says that it is a book of predictions. A book appears. Everything in the book was written crookedly, as if a child. The world in the next 80 years. Various catastrophes were described, and the world believed in it. As a car drives down the road, Shinomiya asks what, if he understands why the world believed. Minato turns his head. The protagonist looks at the girl and says that he doesn't even know her name. The dark-haired girl asks if it is necessary to say him, and continues that he is rushing things too much. Shinomiya turns her head. Minato asks if the prediction came true, and Minato replies that he is an idiot. Shinomiya props his head with his hand and says that if at least one of the predictions comes true, then the world will come to an end. The protagonist opens his eyes wide. Minato turns his head and asks Haitohara how many prophecies there are. Haitohara smiles and says that there are about 2,000 prophecies, and the protagonist shouts that this world will end. The blonde guy looks back and says that about 10 of them have already been stopped by the fighters, and Minato says it's cool. The protagonist turns his head and says that she said the world believed it, and adds that, so why does she think so? The girl presses her hand to her cheek and says that the researcher who discovered the book was named Barnard Russell. A man in a Panama hat walks through the forest. Barnard opens the book, and Minato continues that he turned the first page and started reading. The man looks down. Barnard holds an open book in his hand. He looks at a book and reads information about himself. Signal tapes block the street. The interdimensional fault is medium. A man with a truncheon stretched out his hand forward and shouted that it was necessary to stop. Since passage was prohibited here, it was necessary to go around. Minato turns his head and asks if everything is okay. Hitohara confirms. The protagonist looks at Shinomiya in surprise, and she says that World War III has begun. The moon illuminates the tree. The dark-haired girl says that there have been major crises such as the other side of the moon, the offensive surge, the giant sky tree, and goes on to say that they have been solved by the great transcendence of the world. The blonde guy closed his eyes, and Shinomiya said that Lord Irikihara had recently dealt with the temple incident. Sheets with the text are scattered on the floor. The girl continues to reason that this is why the Book of Predictions is special, and adds that the book has proven that it contains prophecies for this world. With the sky reflected in the windows of the building, Shinomiya goes on to reveal that in order to deal with her from scratch, a group was created that still exists today. An illustration of the degrees of catastrophe of the world appears. Minato looks at the girl's back and asks what he should do now. Shinomiya replies that he, as a member of their group, should go fight. The man in the jacket looks ahead and says that they are coming. A dark-haired girl lifts the ribbon with her hand, and thinks that these are really ordinary people. Kisaragi spreads her hands to the sides and says that it is dangerous to be here and it is necessary to return. The dark-haired girl says that today is a third-level prophecy, and adds that this rift is of middle rank in Area B. The girl opened her eyes wide and said that according to the psalm, the books of the third degree, the rift is widening. The slit increases in size. Kisaragi turns his head. Wolves run out of the rift. Monsters of rank A and above crawl out. A dark-haired man takes a fighting stance and shouts that the battle is about to begin. Kisaragi punches with his hand. The monster attacks the guy. A dark-haired man beats the wolf and says that it would be okay to be class B or C, and adds that this sign indicates that the boss may be next. Kisaragi looks away. Shinomiya looks forward. A dark-haired man raises his hand and shouts for civilians to step back. Shinomiya throws her hand forward and casts a spell. The girl hits the water with her hand. Shinomiya raises his hand up. The monster attacks the man. Spears pierce the bodies of wolves. Hitohara slams his foot into the ground. A guy with yellow hair delivers a stream of punches. Kisaragi looks ahead in surprise and asks who these people are. They seem to be S rank. The dark-haired girl covers her mouth with her hand and says that he needs to step back to blend in with the civilians. Kisaragi looks at the guys and says that he understood that it was a sign, and they are state-owned. The paws emerge from the rift. Shinomiya looks ahead and says that these guys are above S rank. The monster slams its mace into the ground. S rank Gillianus. Kisaragi turns his head and yells for the guys to stop. A dark-haired girl points spears at her opponent. Hitohara looks down. The blonde guy kicks, thinks that the blow is repelled. The armor from physical blows works. The monster looks at the girl. Shinomiya raises her hands. Minato stands up. The main character looks forward. The protagonist throws out his hand towards the monster. Minato holds the opponent's hand with his hand. The monster rests on the guy's hand. Fire illuminates everything around. Shinomiya looks forward. Hitohara opens his mouth wide and shouts that his partner is ahead of him. The yellow-haired guy kicks and muses that even the S-class monster didn't get through, and keeps thinking that what he felt this morning wasn't a misunderstanding. The protagonist looks at his hand, and Hitohara continues to mentally say that in just one night, Minato has changed a lot. Shinomiya looks at the guy's back and says that he shouldn't have done that. The protagonist looks down on the hand and thinks that he can withstand physical attacks, and goes on to say that he can destroy enemies with internal strength. A man in glasses looks ahead. Minato stands in a standing position and thinks that he learned the holy punch yesterday, and goes on to say that he learned the basics for the slip. The protagonist squeezes his palm, and mentally says that it was a good start. Minato looks back. The guy opened his eyes wide and asked for the girl's name, and added that they needed to help each other while they were fighting. The girl looked at Minato and said her name. A guy with yellow hair strikes his opponent with a blow that goes through his body. The werewolves attack. Shinomiya releases the spear of Mercury from his hand. Hitohara rushes forward and says what Minato said. The girl throws up her hand and adds that if you overcome your inner fear, then victory is theirs. The main character turns his head and turns to the newcomer. A crack appears and Shinomiya says that they need to go inside. Kisaragi turns around and says that there is another dimension inside the crack, and that this is crazy. The main character rushes forward and exclaims that he is already coming. A young man runs up to the crack. The man shifts his gaze to him. He drops his hands along his body and exclaims what the hell. Minako approaches the guys, and Hitohara mentally asks that this is the same secret organization. The werewolves run in different directions. The girl raises her palm and says that the same creatures are outside. She waves her hand and exclaims that it looks disgusting. Creatures fly away from the released stream of magic. The guys run forward. The protagonist says that Shinomiya is cool, and Hitohara adds that she is the best at clearing a vast area. The monster beats its chest with its paws. The young man attacks the creature, and the girl asks him to leave the beast to her. The minotaur crosses its legs. Hitohara raises his head and shouts that he is here. Yellow streams of magic envelop the guy. He throws his leg up and Minato admires his punch. The hero throws his body forward. Streams of blue magic surround the guy. The main character appears and asks his friend if everything is okay, and the guy replies that he is fine. Young people and a girl are running along the road. Shinomiya looks up and says that there are fewer enemies and asks what it is. The main character opens his eyes wide. The guys are standing in the middle of the room and discussing that this is a wide room. Shinomiya looked up. The protagonist raised his head. The yellow-haired guy looked away. An incomprehensible creature is approaching the young people from above. They open their mouths in surprise and say that this is impossible. The beast-like monster opens its mouth and pronounces that it is the boss. He lowers his head down. Blind Minotaur, rank S+++. The Minotaur holds a huge axe in his hands, and Minato asks that he is in charge here. Shinomiya releases a fireball from his hand. He envelopes the Minotaur. Blades fly up from the ball. A golden cloud envelopes the entire space. The girl throws out her palm and says that from the very beginning you need to use your strongest attacks against the strongest opponent, and adds that you should avoid stretching the blows. She keeps her eyes fixed on her opponent, and says that she will fight until her spiritual strength is exhausted, and asks that her friends stop her if anything. The yellow-haired guy squats in the rack and yells at the girl that she's all glowing, and adds that she should rely on him. The main character stood up straight and thought that this was an amazing attack. He shifted his gaze and continued that it was a mistake. Haitohara turned to him and asked again. The girl picked up a weapon and told the guy that this was her maximum fire attack. The young man turned his head. The girl turned. The protagonist pulled his head into his shoulders. The Minotaur delivers a devastating blow. A pile of rocks scatters around the boys, and Shinomiya exclaims that he wasn't hurt. The monster moves forward. The children shift their gazes to the side. The clique sits on a chair and thinks it's a talent. The main character turns back and says his name. The metal gilder leans forward and says that the girl has great speed, accuracy, reflexes, and adds that all this at such a young age. Shinomiya raises his hand and says that from the very beginning it is necessary to use his strongest attacks against the strongest opponent, and adds that he has 100 points for fighting unknown enemies, and concludes that a boss of this rank is easy to defeat. The man shifts his gaze to the girl and concludes that otherwise it is a shame, and assumes that she has misjudged his physical resistance. The blind Minotaur lowers its head down. Its physical resistance is 100%. The man adjusts his glasses, and the main character asks him what they should do. The Minotaur deflects Shinomiya's attack. The girl turns around and exclaims that his magic has not diminished, and the boy says that his physical resistance has reached a peak. The main character shifts his gaze to the girl and asks her to lend him her body. The guy raises his hand and declares that he will set an example for the young lady. He directs the spear of Mercury forward. The Minotaur swings his weapon. The girl looks at the protagonist and asks how he used her skill, and Minato tells her why. He turns his head and orders her to be quiet. Shinomiya's eyes widen, and the young man says that she should be more attentive, because she is an alchemist. The Minotaur opens its mouth, and the guy continues to say that there are 3 matters, and that depending on this, it must be used correctly. The flames incinerate the beast. Haitohara covers her face with her hand and says that it has become hot, and the girl adds that it is physically impossible, because the temperature is too high. The beast opens its mouth, and the young lady wonders that such high temperature control is possible. The main character stands in front of a man and he says that he and the girl are good, and adds that Minato will also be his student. The guy replies that he is glad. Stones are scattered around the room. The young man with yellow hair shifted his gaze. This mission foretold the catastrophe of their psalm. Minato straightens his shoulders and thinks that they defeated the blind Minotaur that they could. The weapon crumbles into sparks. Shinomiya's eyes bulged in surprise and thought it was impossible. Minato and Midori slapped each other's arms. The girl added that a Transcendent can only possess the power indicated by the mark on his hand, and she thought that he had taijutsu at the level of Hiko. However, Minato was better at alchemy than she was, and asked herself if this guy was who. The guy held out his right hand to her. He smiled broadly at her and told her that his name was Minato, and let her remember it. The girl twisted her face in surprise. She shook Minato's hand and announced that she would remember it now. The yellow-haired guy turned on them and thought that Minato seemed to have taken Shinomiya safely. In the middle of the street, there was a rift in the air. A guy from the crowd said that look, the crack is getting smaller. Kisaragi looked at him in shock. The other guy asked what was going on inside. Minato's head popped out of the crack. Midori and Shinomiya followed him, someone saying that they had entered the crevasse and returned safely. The girl landed between the guys. The first asked that the mission was completed. The girl replied that it was right. You need to return to the headquarters and report everything. The second guy said that it was a difficult mission. The main character turned to Kisaragi. He bowed to him and said that he asked for forgiveness, and thanked him for helping him and his subordinates. He looked at the guy and added that they had done something inside. Although they probably wouldn't say anything, Shinomiya replied that yes, he understood everything himself. The girl waved her fingers and added that by the way, just let them put this mark in their report, and everything would become clear to everyone. A group of teenagers walked away from him. The man said that he understood everything, and that he hoped that the danger had passed. The girl replied that he should not worry, this is a rare case. Minato and Midori walked behind her. She stated that it was unlikely that they would meet again, so let them return to normal life. Kisaragi scratched his head and said that they were indeed ordinary people compared to them. The 11th of May, settlement N of the prefecture of K. The sun was setting behind the mountains. The elderly man was walking, leaning on his cane, under the supervision of a police officer. The sun shone on the mountains. An image of Japanese characters appeared against the background of residential buildings. headquarters of the opposing forces. A group of teenagers got out of the car. Shinomiya said that this was the report. Midori noted that he received a call on his phone. The girl asked that immediately after the mission. Prophecy Laboratory, 3rd level. The girl opened the door to the office. The guy replied that it was from the laboratory. The three of them stared in surprise. At the pulpit stood a man in front of a red-haired guy. The guy sat back and said that the rank 3 mission had taken too long. A red-haired guy was standing near Shinomiya. Minato thought it was the man. Midori stretched out his hand in front of him. The girl explained that Shinji, why is he so cocky? Don't be so arrogant. The guy asked them both to stop. The guy with glasses looked at them, and Shinomiya asked what he wanted. The company took their seats in the office. The guy told them to look at the screen. It was sent to him by analysts. There was a red glowing object on the tile. The girl asked what it was burning. Kurihara lowered his gaze and replied that it was a book of divination. A drop of sweat slid down Minato's cheek. He added that it was burned, was discovered in a volcanic zone and postponed due to the lack of progress in deciphering it. The main character asked that the burnt book of prophecies could no longer be read. The guy adjusted his glasses and added that this time, with the help of the latest technologies using beams and artificial intelligence, it was possible to partially decipher, and the content became clear. All those present in the hall opened their eyes in surprise. Kurihara said that there is a prophecy in which Japan appears. Shinomiya looked down and said that this could be the latest prophecy. Minato looked at Midori and asked if it was rare, who replied that yes, even he had heard of it for the first time. There were windows in the walls. Kurihara added that the research department of the opposing forces was excellent. It collected prophecies from all over the world. Without them they would not know a single prophecy. Shinji looked down and announced that in other words, the 4 of them were being asked to investigate. Midori turned to Minato and said that it was a good idea. Now many participants are out of the game, so he would blow a regular member of the team. The protagonist replied that he did not see Ichihara after that. The guy adjusted his glasses and said that he would like to ask the 4 people present to go to the dormitory, then check their emails for details, and that they should be sent immediately. Minato opened his mouth and eyes in shock and said that immediately the next mission. The girl replied that this is quite a common occurrence. Midori said that he would get used to it. The guy thought that the whole world was at stake. Shinji stood up from the table and said that he understood. He stood in front of Kurihara and added that he and the other 3 were going on an exploratory mission. The car was moving along the track. Minato remembered the professor's words that he had said that the difficulty of the mission was not appreciated, so he had to be careful, and if the prophecy came true, then they were waiting for help. The protagonist looked out the window and thought that an unknown mission whose rank was not revealed, not to be nervous, it was just a small mission. Shinomiya sat between the guys and said that the 3 of them should sleep after the mission, and that there would be a problem if they ran out of steam on the other side. Shinji told her to try to control. They would be fine even if they didn't sleep. The girl shook her head. The main character announced that he would take his word for it. Midori added that he did too. Good night. The trio fell asleep together in the back seat. The girl clutched her head and noted that if she did not sleep, she would never fall asleep. Shinomiya fell on Minato. The girl jumped up abruptly. Someone told her to wake up. She replied that she was awake. The whole squad went outside. She asked why they didn't wake her up. The guy looked somewhere in the distance and told her to look. The girl looked over his shoulder. She stepped forward and asked what it was. The whole group was standing at the cliff. Midori looked down and said that the situation had worsened already. A huge crystal protruded from the ground. He added that no matter what they did, the prophecy would come true. Shinomiya stood next to Shinji and reported that the magic circle, that red pillar, was the result of 23 people's activities and a report. The guy had said that there had been an incident in the past. A huge black hole had swallowed up part of the house. The guy added that an apartment of 30 years ago had disappeared in Wakayama. A 30-year-old prophecy. A hole in another dimension was about to open. The crystal with the skeleton inside began to glow. The yellow-haired guy opened his mouth in surprise and said that the pillar. The girl said that they didn't seem to have time to think. Shinji grabbed the hilt of his sword, and Midori asked what they were doing. The guy put his sword in front of him and announced that of course to prevent a disaster. Kurihara shifted his gaze and told them to wait for help. The girl asked if this meant that they would violate the order of their superiors. Lightning shot out behind them. Minato stood shrouded in blue flames. He looked at the guys and asked what they were coming. The girl looked at him and thought that Minato, him. Midori turned to him and thought that he had become even stronger in half a day. Shinji stood with his back to the protagonist and said that it looked like he wouldn't be a hindrance. He jumped down sharply and said that he was behind him. The whole company followed him. The girl asked him not to get ahead of her. She would not leave it unattended. The red crystal was glowing. Melee stood next to Hinoki and mentioned that she smelled nostalgic. He replied that she did, and when he was alive, he often inhaled its aroma. In the middle of the field there was a monument. A hand escaped from the ground. Hinoki looked at his girlfriend and said that it was a forbidden technique. There is an image of a burning page of a book, a prophecy of a fiery book, 1,000 moons as crimson as she is, and as if soaring into the heavens, the flames of the sky darken, and flashes rush into the underworld. An image of a painted man with a bowl of red liquid appeared, the Transcendent, the mighty sorcerer Banto Shirjima. An image of an enlarged man from the painting appeared, committed a real massacre, and defeated the same Transcendental as him. Shirjima washed the entire village in blood. Blood flowed from the man to the ground. He was pouring blood out of a barrel and said he didn't have much time. The man with bandages on his head grinned ominously and said that 1,000 years from now, he would be in this world. An image of a demon appeared with a mark on his hand. He added that he would appear as a demon lord who devoured all living things, and show how to rule in this world. An image of a hieroglyph appeared, a forbidden technique of Banto Shirjima. When sacrificed inside the circle, the sorcerer will be resurrected in the same place after a while. A black silhouette hovered in the air against the moon. This mission, the exploration, suspension, of a new prophecy recorded in a fiery book. The man looked down, the level unknown, the boss, Banto Shirjima. He wiggled his fingers and said that he had reborn with the same level of strength and asked if there were enough victims. Banto looked around and added that so much time had passed, the area was outdated. Well. He stuck out his index finger and noted that it seemed that new victims had appeared. The squad fell behind him. He activated a skill, the Ink Curse. An explosion occurred behind him. Minato covered himself with his hands and called out to his comrades. Midori also covered himself with his hands and declared that they were fine. The guy looked up and said that it was from below. The boy and Shinomiya looked down. A red circle of light appeared under their feet. The girl looked back. The witchcraft and death of Midori's faces and her had grown closer. She thought that it was useless. He was using skills one by one. Banto kept his fingers protruding. The girl noted that this opponent was really strong. He looked away. Minato attacked him. The boss began to dodge every attack of the guy instantly. He said that it was not bad, but he was weak. A red circle of light appeared on his feet, the curse of Ing. A huge pillar of fire appeared in front of Banto. He looked up. Minato flew at him with lightning in his hand. He opened his mouth and said that it was lightning. Banto raised his hand above him for protection. The guy looked at him. The boss held his finger up and said that he was starting to like it. Shinji crept up behind him. He swung his sword, skill. Banto stared at him in shock, a golden flower. The guy looked away. The boss jumped over his attack and stated that it was a shame. He looked at him upside down. The guy raised his sword to the soda and said that he didn't think he could win at this level, skill. The boss has landed, Autumn Iris. He wore a feathered hat on his head, and he announced that it was raining if his technician could create a clone of Kensen. He raised his hand in front of him and said that swords were not his forte. The guy put his sword in front of him for protection. He and the boss became close. He said that it was wonderful, just unbelievable. He was the strongest among them. Minato looked at them in shock and thought that he didn't understand this guy's strength. A boy with yellow hair was standing on the grass. The guy with a sword in his hand stretched out his hand to the boy. The main character noted that he was completely different from the previous opponents. From Ichihara he felt something related. What to do? The guy turned to someone's voice that called out to him. Shinomiya and Midori floated in the air. They rushed to attack. The girl said no, let him not do it, he would be stunned. The boss held out his hand behind him and asked him not to be distracted. Between him and the running rebis, 3 circles of different colors appeared on the ground. Images of cattle skulls, Shikigami, and Byakuoni, Mukuro appeared. The yellow-haired guy attacked with his foot. He looked down. 2 monsters were standing in front of them. The guy thought that these creatures, both of them. An image of a humanoid creature with the head of a bull appeared. The guy added that it was like a minotaur. A green monster appeared in front of Minato. He clenched his hand into a fist. The guy looked at him decisively. The boss attacked Shinji with many punches and said that it was a pity that help would not come to them. The guy asked him again. He launched a successful attack on the boss. He held a sword in front of him and said that he did not need help. The red-haired guy pointed his finger and stated that he was the resurrected Shinji. The guy grabbed the hilt of his sword with his hand and announced that one would be enough. He looked at Banto and said that in this world, you can only rely on yourself. The boss put his hand on his chest and said that it was true. He opened his mouth wide and added that he didn't need the others. That's why he would eat the one named after him. Shinji was standing right in front of him with a sword. He was repelling the boss's attacks with his sword and thought that it was too fast. He looked at the boss. Minato shouted his name. The protagonist ran towards him. He held out his hand in front of him. The boss turned to him and thought what he was doing here, where the ghosts were. Midori and Shinomiya fought monsters. Only his legs remained standing from the green monster. Minato's fist flew into Banto's face. The boss flew a few meters. Shinji looked at him and said that this guy replied that he couldn't do it alone. The boss licked his lips. The protagonist stood in front of Shinji and explained that they would win if they joined forces. The boss was standing away from the guys. Minato said that he could not win alone. Shinji looked at him. Midori attacked the red monster, the red-haired guy noting that even Midori and Shinomiya couldn't handle their opponents. Shinomiya flew at his opponent from above. The guy added that considering this, how did he do it? The protagonist put out his hand to attack and said that he needed to defeat him by joining forces. Shinji took a fighting stance with a mesa and said that it was not necessary. He furrowed his brows and added that he didn't need any help and would do it alone. The guy looked at him in shock. Bando flew up to the guys. He drank his hands in front of him and said that he too wanted to enjoy them one at a time. Sorcery. Shinji instantly jumped away from his attack. A huge pillar of fire flew out of the boss's hands. A fiery flash. Minato flew far away from the scene of the battle. Bando swung his hand for the next attack. The red-haired guy stopped the attack with his sword. Minato, who was flying from the impact, left a mark on the ground. He sat exhausted, leaning against a stump. He raised his head slightly. 2 people were standing in front of him. Melees and Hinoki were standing in front of him. The guy said that he had passed out, so they called him here. The main character grabbed his forearm. He stood up to his full height and said that he had to go. The guy looked at them in shock. Hinoki replied that he should stop fighting. His eyes widened in surprise. The boss repelled Shinji's attack. He has made many attacks on him and said that he has the same style of thinking as him. The guy looked at him menacingly. His sword glowed with red fire. He noted that he would be able to tear it apart with his skills. He said that yes, others are not needed. The boss opened his mouth and announced that therefore, he would eat it all. The guy Anons hits the Bando. He looked at him. A sword slipped from his hand. The guy attacked the boss. The boss threw back his head and shouted that it was okay, let him amuse him more. The guy held his blade in both hands. Behind Minato were Melees and Hinoki, who said that he could see Shinji stronger than Shinomiya and Midori, and there was a big difference with the sorcerers. The guy blocked the boss's attack. The protagonist looked at him in shock, with Hinoki adding that this level was still too hard for him. Melees looked at the battle and added that he had performed a technique to resurrect after death and recuperate from human casualties, and asked if there was an entire city near him. Bando held out his hands in front of him. The girl stated that the enemy had shown himself to be the king of demons. A drop of sweat dripped down Minato's cheek. She added that if it became stronger, then a significant blow would be dealt to the civilian population. A fire book was burning on the tile. Hinoki said that the rank of the Proshev was unknown. This guy was able to hit him by pure chance. Two spirits hovered over the protagonist. One of them announced that this time he would defeat him, and it was necessary for him to give the body to one of them. The guy resolutely shouted no. Hinoki looked at him in shock. Melees' eyes widened in surprise. A blue mark burned on the guy's hand. He told them to forgive, but now everything is for real, and not training. The man stuck out his tongue. A candy was held in the man's hands. The guy added that in the future, he did not believe that the troubles would pass when he gained strength. The guy looked at the fight with enthusiasm, and asked what was right. Melees looked at him, and said that he was. Hinoki closed his eyes and said that this guy was surprising again. The blue-haired guy stood in front of Hinoki and said that against the background of them, he would surpass them. Who said that for sure, Minato, he should surpass the creators. He put his hand on his shoulder, and said that it was all right. The ghost stood behind the guy and told him to show the result of the training, and did something with him. The guy walked away from them. He turned to them. He raised his hand and told them to look at him, Guru. He rushed into the battle to help. Hinoki and Melees watched him. Bando has made a huge number of attacks on Shinji, and asked if there was a catch. The guy stopped the blow with his blade. He flew high up. A sphere appeared in the hands of the boss. He said that this was the end. Shinji's sword slipped out of his hands. The blade spins on top of it. Minato grabbed it. The red-haired guy opened his mouth in surprise. Minato put his hand on his shoulder and stated that he would borrow his sword. The guy narrowed his eyes. He would fall down and say it was a rookie. Shinji landed on both feet. In front of the boss, the sphere from his hands swelled. A huge pillar of fire flew out of his hands, a fiery flash. The guy swung his sword from behind, Hinoki Toryu. A trail from his attack remained in front of the guy's face. His magic attack pierced through the boss's attack, the storm rip. The mark of the blows stretched over the entire field. Bando's arm flew upwards. He thought that why, this technique. The guy was flying in the air. He added who this guy was. Minato looked at the boss and said that he was Minato, a person who would surpass the creators. Melees stood next to Hinoki and asked if he thought the guy could defeat this sorcerer. The guy with the sword flew at the boss. The spirit replied that now, they could only watch. He was standing in the middle of the forest. The trio of fighters slept in the back seats of the car. Hinoki thought that Minato would not be stupid, and he picked up something while he was sleeping in the car. The creator smiled broadly and added that it was something else. The guy swung his sword. Shinji watched the fight between Minato and the boss. Minto attacked Bando with lightning speed. He looked at his hand and asked who this guy was. The guy stood in front of Shinji and said that he had to unite to defeat him. He raised his sword in front of him and said that he was fighting alone. He pursed his lip. Shinji furrowed his brows. Minato struck with his sword. Bando's attacks rained down on him. He stretched out his hand in front of him with protruding fingers, a skill, forbidden fruits. The guy instantly jumped away from the attack. The attacks aimed at the guy's back. He jumped up and thought that he would chase him until he hit him. The guy landed in front of the shells. He jumped up. The black guy with glasses looked up. He took a fighting stance. The guy got into the same stance, shaking. In front of him, a stone shield rose from the ground. The boss's entire attack hit the stone barrage. Bando raised his hand in front of him and noted that this child had climbed a rock. The guy turned his head back. Stones from his skill were flying in front of him. A series of explosions occurred in the sky. The boss's eyes bulged at Minato's attack. The guy got into a fighting pose. A black girl jumped in front of him. The guy began to jump on the stones. The method of movement, mirror reflection. He was behind Bando. He turned to the guy. The guy struck a slashing blow with his sword. A deep cut appeared on the boss's cheek. He asked who he was. Bando repelled the protagonist's attack. A huge luminous hieroglyph, the curse of Een, appeared on the ground. Stones flew into the air. The guy hid himself from them with his hands. Minato pushed off the rock and thought that the main thing was not to miss it. An image of all the creators appeared. The guy added that you need to use all the skills that he managed to learn. The guy fell right on top of the boss. He raised his head up. Blood gushed from the wound on his arm. Minato's magic attack pierced the boss's attack. The guy struck the boss. The protagonist opened his mouth. The main character pushed off the stone. Banto noted that fencing, taijutsu, magic, movement, the skill level of those guys is high enough, but not enough to defeat him. But this kid. The boss opened his eyes in surprise. He added that such a technique, and how many of them he had. Hinoki opened his mouth in surprise. Melees noted that even for a high-level monster, this was too much. The guy looked at the boss out of the corner of his eye, who noted that his speed continued to increase. Melees looked at him and thought that it would. The boss was standing in the middle of the field and thought he was interesting, but he turned his head back and activated the forbidden jutsu. A magical pillar of fire appeared on the battlefield. The creators raised their heads up. Shinomiya looked up in shock. The girl instantly bounced off the boss's attack. She lifted her head up and asked what it was. In front of Minato was a huge skeleton, a fusion of bones. There was a boss on his head. He said that he liked this child. He looked at the protagonist and added that this alone was not enough. The monster's hand rushed towards the guy. Hinoko and Melees looked at him. The guy told him to run. The main character stood calmly in the middle of the battlefield. He lowered his eyes and thought that if he were to run to the fullest, he would not be able to overcome him. The guy closed his eyes and added that forward, we need to break through. Melees held out her hand and told him to remember their lesson in magic, and that it was necessary to do it all over again, and that first of all, the basis of magic was a bright flame. Fire appeared in the girl's hand. She lowered her hand. Hinoki took his katana out of its sheath and said that Hinokitoryu has two states, the verdict of the storm, the blow that destroys the opponent the first time. A huge plume remained from his attack. He added that he only needed to lower it down for a moment, forget doubts and fears. The creator looked ahead in front of him and said that you should only look at your opponent. The guy held the blade in his hand. An image of a flash from the attack appeared. The young man raised his sword above him, shrouded in flames. Melees opened her mouth in surprise and said that he was a fool. Hinoki looked at him and shouted his name. The guy swung his sword from his back and said that come on, Banto, this technique was created by Minato himself, you need to name it. The protagonist's magical attack touched the boss's huge skeleton, the verdict of the hot air. Part of Banto's torso flew freely in the air. The guy looked at him. The creator with an eye patch held a sword in front of him and said that inochi is used in different ways, it depends on the person. He seized the blade. The light reflected off the katana. The guy added that it was like a thin thread, and if he tried, it would cut the first time. He looked ahead in front of him and said that it was now. A huge skeleton hand reached out to Minato, and Hinoko asked how he saw him. The guy narrowed his eyes. The boss folded his hands. The guy added that Banto as he sees it. A flame was glowing on the stand. The creator explained that the light, a small and weak flame. An image of flames in a bathtub funnel appeared. Hinoko added that one sword created the storm. No. The water funnel was enveloped in fire. The guy said that even better, he was consumed by a strong flame. The protagonist's magical attack touched the boss's huge skeleton, the verdict of the hot air. The huge skeleton began to burn. Part of Banto's torso flew freely in the air. Hinoko and Melees looked at him in shock. The guy realized that it was unbelievable. He was able to unite. The young man stood in a fighting stance with a sword. The guy raised the sword above him. The creator added that his magic and swordsmanship. Click jumped up from his chair and said that it was understandable, interesting. Glasses sat on his nose. He added that this was recklessness. The guy began to jump on the stones. He dealt a devastating blow to Banto. Minato fell down with a zipper in his hand. The guy with gray hair remarked that he could switch to all kinds of vehicles. The protagonist's magical attack hit the boss's huge skeleton. Hinoki turned back and thought he was weird. He looked at the girl standing next to him, who said that if the alchemist was right, then they had underestimated Minato. The girl looked ahead in front of her and asked if he could pull it. Hinoki looked up and assured her that everything would be fine, and that she didn't want to see it. The main character stood in a fighting stance with a sword. He added that he would come to an end at the hands of Minato. The guy closed his eyes slightly. He slumped his shoulders in exhaustion. The boss's blood boiled on the ground. Banto's restored body crawled out of it. The guy looked at him. The boss stood up to his full height and noted that he was not dangerous now. Hit him on the head. But he would die the same one, and that for the first time he was breaking out in a cold sweat. He stretched out his hand for a magical attack and said that it was already gone. His head flew away from the body, a mountain chrysanthemum. Blood gushed out at the site of the cut. Banto reported that he was also there. Blood flowed from Shinji's forehead. He caught Minato falling. The boss opened his eyes in surprise. The red-haired guy laid his comrade on the ground. Part of the boss's head fell to the ground. The thin guy was holding his comrade on his lap. Snow was falling from the sky. The guy noted that it was cold. They were sitting under the bridge. He added that they would hold out until morning. Only until morning. Banto looked at his brother and said that they would eat. His brother closed his eyes. The guy's eyes widened at him. A cart drove across the bridge. Banto covered himself with hay leaves and noted that it was cold. The cart was pulled by a bull. People followed him. In the air, parts of the boss's head crumbled to dust. Shinji held Minato on his lap. He pursed his lips. The guy sank completely to the ground. The red-haired guy gritted his teeth and said that he was not alone at all. His eyes widened in surprise. Shinomiya and Midori ran towards him. They ran up to Minato's topic. The girl asked that he was safe, he was alive. The guy replied that there were no threats to life. The girl looked at the guy and said that it was good. Midori looked up and said that the main thing was that everything was fine, but they would rejoice later. The glass dome cracked above their heads. The guy noted that the barrier, what's inside, both support energy, and if they break inside. Shinji took a fighting stance with the sword and said that he would be able to avoid the pressure. At the moment of the explosion, he would stop the blow with everything he had. Midori looked at him. He thought that they were now, no, even if everything was done perfectly, was success possible. Tsunami held out their hands in front of them. The young man looked at his sword and noted that there was no choice. Bloodied, Minato raised his sword. Shinji turned to him and thought it was a new one. He lay with his eyes closed. An image of the protagonist lying in front of Hinoki appeared, who told him to wake up as soon as possible. The guy opened his mouth slightly. He held out his hand in front of him and shouted for them to look at the guru. The creator raised a sword in front of him and stated that he had seen through it. The glass dome was completely cracked. The entire squad stood in fighting stances. The protagonist announced that Hinoki Toryu, a stream of clouds. The guy pushed off the ground. 3 guys ran to the dome. One told the captain that it was a barrier. Glass shards collapsed on the guys. Suko stopped. Someone said that they were late. Suko replied that they were not. A pillar of light burst out of the dome. Minato continued to hold his sword above him. The 3 guys looked at the pole. Suko stood in front and said that the flash of the sword was as if nothing had happened. He looked at him intently and asked who the hell was this guy. Minato smiled as he held his sword. A plane flew in the sky. Ichihara asked what the newcomers were able to prevent a prophecy of an unknown level. Interesting. Japan. Dryly held the sword in his right hand and stated that the final grade was the 2nd level. He tucked his blade behind his back and added that it could potentially be equivalent to the 1st. Ichihara held his leg and said that it was not bad. The guy was sitting on the plane and added that while he was gone, it seemed that they had all grown up. He held the phone to his ear and noted that, however, the person who had contributed the most was Minato, who had enlisted 2 days earlier. Minato was holding a sword, and the yellow-haired guy said he had found it, and asked who he was. He opened his mouth slightly in a smile and added that he was the one who would do away with all prophecies. He looked dryly at the phone. There was an earring hanging on the guy's earlobe. He said that they were waiting for him, and that maybe he was the one. The red-haired guy held the phone to his ear and asked that his expectations were so high. Ichihara replied that if he didn't believe himself, then why didn't he see for himself? He asked him to come back already. Without him it was difficult to compete with someone on an equal footing. Ichihara closed his eyes and laughed. The girl on the phone said that she was right in front of him. She held the walkie-talkie to her face. A huge female figure appeared behind the plane. A super prophecy when the sun will go out. The girl closed her eyes. Boss, suicidal tendencies, Ishtam. A flash appeared on the plane. The boss opened his eyes. The plane was flying straight at her, and Ichihara asked Soho to continue. A blue sphere formed in his hand. He added that he would quickly finish. A divine vortex. Curtains hung from the wall. Minato opened his eyes and mouth abruptly. The nurse looked at him and said that he woke up. The guy sat up on the bed and asked where he was. The girl replied that he was in the infirmary of the opponents. He opened his palm. The girl added that he had returned from the mission and woke up only now. The guy thought that he had fainted. The protagonist stood in front of the creators and noted that he slept so deeply that he did not even move into the space to the creators. The nurse pulled back the curtain and said that he was fine, and if he needed anything, let him call her. Shinji was sitting on a chair with his arms crossed. The main character wondered why he was looking at him like that. He shook his head and asked where the others were. Shinji replied that they immediately started training as soon as they returned. Midori and Shinomiya walked forward, the red-haired guy adding that they were very disappointed that they couldn't fight back. There was a plaster hanging on the guy's cheek, he said it all. Minato put his hand on his shoulder and stated that he would borrow his sword. The fist of the main character flew into Banto's face. The young man stretched out his hand in flight. The guy was lying on his back holding a sword in his hand. The protagonist's magical attack hit the boss's huge skeleton. The verdict of the hot air. Shinji explained that his power is overwhelming. Minato stared at him in shock and asked him for forgiveness. The red-haired guy stood in front of him and asked who he was. Banto held his index finger outstretched. Fangs protruded from the monster's mouth. The guy added that he had appeared 2 days ago and had already defeated a 3rd-rank monster, and then, potentially, the 1st. Minato misses the boss with his attack. The guy began to jump on the stones. The method of movement, mirror reflection. A hero flew at him with lightning in his hand. The guy raised a fiery sword above him. Shinji noted that fusion. He had never seen or heard of such a thing. A drop of sweat slipped down Minato's cheek. The guy asked how he did it. He furrowed his brows at him and asked what they needed to do to be like him. Brother Shinji came into the room and said that he would disturb him. The 2 guys turned to look at him. He dryly took the sword with his hand and called the name of the main character. He looked at him and asked who he was. Shinji looked at him and stated that it was his brother. He walked past him. The guy looked at him out of the corner of his eye. Shinji stood with his hands down. Minato looked at Suho and asked what his brother was. Suko swung his sword sharply. Shinji covered his face with his hand. The guy continued to hold the sword in his hand. The protagonist sat in the corner on the ceiling and asked that this was another kind of test. A drop of sweat slid down his cheek. He went down to the floor. Suho said that an ordinary Transcendent trainee wouldn't be able to react so quickly. He looked at the guy and explained that it was clear that he had passed. Minato stared at him in shock and asked him again. Shinji stood behind Suho. The guy exclaimed that this was a prevention of confrontations, and he was Suho's captain. The protagonist looked at his brother and thought it was his brother. Suko advised him to rank 1. The guy looked at him in shock. He added that he was temporarily enlisted in his squad. Shinji looked at him out of the corner of his eye. He stood with his hands down and thought, his brother, the captain, and he immediately got to him. He was never even allowed to accompany him. Minato ran after Soho, who said that they would start with a briefing. Shinji's fist was bathed in blood. He lowered his eyes to the floor. There was a sign on the wall that said it was a training ground. Shinomiya stopped Midori's attack with her shield. She threw away her shield. The girl jumped behind Midori. Magical hands grabbed them. The protagonist's magical attack touched the boss's huge skeleton, the verdict of the hot air. Minato took a fighting stance with a sword, Shinomiya saying that no matter how much she repeated, she couldn't compare to Minato. She gritted her teeth in anger. Midori looked down. A human silhouette appeared in the doorway. An earring dangled from his earlobe. She said that they were gushing with energy. Ichihara held the carpets on his shoulder and added that he was at home and asked how about fruit chocolate straight from Peru, or alpaca wool carpets. A Panama hat flew off his head. Shinomiya and Midori rushed to him and asked him how long he would be in Japan. He replied that about a week. They looked at him and told him to train them. Sweat ran down the guy's cheek. The girls stared at Ichihara and exclaimed that they would not lose to Minato. Ichihara looked at the guys in amazement. The girl crossed her arms. The guy thought that he did not think that he would see such burning eyes in these children. They stood in front of the guy, who asked what Minato was, how he lit them. He looked at them kindly and said that it was good. A human silhouette appeared in the doorway. Ichihara asked what Shinji and he was. He held a bandage in his hand and announced that please, he can't afford to be left behind by Minato either. The protagonist ran after Suko. He opened his eyes wide at him. Shinji stood in front of the whole company. The girl asked what it was. He walked dryly past his brother. Shinomiya and Midori looked at him in shock. He said that Suho had taken the main character into his squad. The girl thought that it had already been. Ichihara held his leg and said that if he was interested, why should he see it for himself? Shinji lowered his eyes to the floor and said that it was his fault that he fell behind. Minato ran behind Suho. He asked what the briefing was. He replied that they had already decided on a mission, leaving tomorrow. The guy stopped abruptly. With a sword hanging on his back, he asked that Minato was intimately acquainted with Shinji. The protagonist stood in front of Shinji. Shinomiya sat between the guys. The protagonist put his hand on his shoulder and said that he would borrow his sword. Shinji sat in a chair with his arms crossed. Minato asked what happened to Suho. They met 2 days ago. If they had become friends, he gave him his weapon and waited until he woke up. The guy happily opened his eyes wide and replied that yes. Dryly stood in front of him and said that this is how it is. There were tiles on the wall. Shinji stood with his eyes down on the floor and said that brother, he wasn't worried about him at all. The guy gritted his teeth and added that lately, he had only looked at him once at best. The captain looked away at the window and added that recently, he had a wound so terrible that it was impossible to even look at it. The guy opened his mouth and shouted in resentment for his brother to at least look at him. He had no choice but to risk his life and become stronger. Dryly calmly looked out the window and said that he didn't have to do it, he just wanted to be safe. Minato followed him and asked that they had a good relationship, and he replied that of course. Shinji stood with his hands down and said that Minato should calm down, he would see everything later. Dryly calmly walked forward and said that he was extremely sympathetic to his brother, whom he valued very much. His brother furrowed his brows and said that he would definitely defeat his older brother. Minato closed his eyes and thought it was a good relationship. There was a sign on the wall that said that there was a training ground. Shinomiya asked what was wrong with Shinji. Of course, it was none of her business. But why did the motivation to become stronger suddenly appear? Midori asked that yes. The girl added that Shinji competes a lot with his brother, thereby showing his talent. And when she asked if he hated him, he yelled at her. Shinji looked at the girl and told her to have respect. Shinomiya held out her hands in front of her and stated that he wanted Suho to pay attention to him. Midori looked at the guy and said that it was understandable, funny. Ichihara looked at him while eating dessert. Midori asked what was funny. Yes. An image of space appeared. The 3 rules of the Suho clan: to be fast, never stop advancing, to get out of a disadvantageous position, the Suho clan. Behind Suko stood 6 people, recognized as the strongest in battle. Among the already existing combat detachments, he consisted of about 7 people. There was a military cargo helicopter flying in the sky. They only deal with prophecies of rank A and above, Koriyama stated that he was told. He waved his hand and added that about 90% of the squad's forces were in Suko, so sometimes they slacked off. Minato held the phone in his hand. The guy asked the temporary member not to worry and left everything to Captain Suho. He looked at Minato and told him to put down his phone. The helicopter flew over the clouds. The protagonist replied that he could not contact. Koriyama asked him again. Near the young man stood the spirits of the creators. The yelling noted that for sure, everyone was making a lot of noise. The girl took the phone in her hands. Midori said that the message was from Minato. Shinomiya said that she was too, and then sharply asked who he was with. The guy covered his mouth with his hand and explained that Minato is. He raised his head dryly from the phone and asked what the hell he was trying to do. Ichihara looked at their phones and asked what it was. Midori said it was from Minato. A message from Minato lit up on the screen. On the second phone, a message from the protagonist was also burning. On the third phone, a message from the main character was also displayed. Ichihara pointed his finger at the screen and said that it was good. He looked at the phone screen and thought that these were specific instructions tailored to the origins and habits of all three of them, things they should learn. The trio stood in front of him. He remembered that they had received a good gift. He stretched out his hand and asked what they were doing then. Why not start? Midori held the phone in his hand and said that they were starting. Shinomiya also said that they were starting. Steam came out of Shinji's mouth. He said he would make him regret it. He would definitely defeat him. The guy asked that he remembered that they were not enemies. He added that Minato should wait for him. The young man closed his eyes. Koriyama noted that he was remembered. He wiped the helicopter's window. Spikes of ice protruded from the icy hills. In the middle of the frozen valley, there was an icy deer, a first-class prophecy, frozen ground. The calamity was expanding and freezing everything around. It was predicted that the scale would increase exponentially. The earth is covered with ice. If you leave it, in the near future the entire earth will completely freeze. An image of a map of the earth appeared. Someone said that this disaster is observed in 17 points around the world. In some countries outbreaks occurred in cities, which caused panic. Mana leaned his hand on his waist and said that Japan was lucky that it had started in the mountains, and that it was expanding faster than reported, and they had no time to think. Suko stepped forward along the side of the helicopter and said that the only way to get here was by helicopter. The rear door of the helicopter began to lower. The guy added that they would go down through the hatch. He stood at the exit and explained that he could not stay so long, otherwise there would be damage. Soho looked into the distance and said that the Soho clan, 3 at a time. Minato stood behind the entire squad. The captain added that the first, speed, second, immediately attack, third, compensate for the shortcomings with strength. The young man looked down. The main character, lying on his back, held a sword in his hand. Hinoko held out his sword in front of him. The protagonist repeated his pose, noting that in the battle with Banto, he eventually relied on Hinoko. 2 soldiers jumped out of the helicopter. He added that this was a great opportunity to learn something new from a strong detachment. The guy looked ahead of him and said that this time, he would complete the task on his own. He stepped onto the platform to jump. He jumped after everyone and thought that the first-class prophecy, in this mission, he would fail that he would never forget. 10:17 a.m. Soho and his squad stood in front of the ice spikes. Koriyama said that how cold it was. Soho's squad had arrived at the place of the prophecy. Mana looked at the watch on her wrist. The guy added that Minato, like Transcendence, they are resistant to temperature changes. The girl added that the temperature was minus 33 degrees, lower than stated. There were ice spikes on the snow-covered hills. The captain explained that the search area was huge, and that most likely the prophecy was at the center of the disaster. He looked away. The protagonist looked at Koriyama and asked him for forgiveness, and asked that it was in the divination book as frozen ground. An image of the silhouette of a man appeared. He replied that no, this prophecy was made by a person with the skill of counter-prediction, and that such things appear here and there. But this is the first time he has seen the first rank, so since Suko's squad is suitable for the mission, they were sent. Mana looked at Minato and asked what he was worried about. She smiled slightly through her mask and added that it was better to be on the safe side than not to be careful, but let him relax a little. Koriyama put his hands on his shoulders and told him to relax. There are 8 regular squads in the Japanese confrontation unit. They are assigned to disasters of the first rank. He raised his hand. Mana explained that she had talked about the need to relax. He asked for forgiveness. He looked up and reported that his radar had detected the enemy. Minato looked at him out of the corner of his eye. Koriyama looked ahead of him and said that there were 200 beings 200 hours away. Mana furrowed her brows and replied that she understood. The guy looked around the snowy hills and thought that they had disappeared. The girl appeared next to the captain and stated that he had returned. Koriyama at the appointed place. A sword was stuck in the head of the ice monster. She added that the estimated score of the monsters, SS++ level, there are about 30 of them. He looked dryly into the distance and said that he would gather everyone together. Mana waved her hand and replied that she understood. Suko's squad attacked the ice gargoyle. Minato stared at them in shock and thought it was cool. Koriyama looked up and reported that his radar had picked up the enemy. Koriyama looked ahead in front of him. A sword was stuck in the head of the ice monster. She added that the supposed assessment of the monsters, SS++ level, there are about 30 of them. The guy thought that in order to cooperate, he needed to understand the situation. There were 200 creatures 200 hours away. Soho's squad attacked the ice gargoyle. The protagonist noted that no matter how accidentally he got to them, these people are first-class warriors. Minato looked at Soho and said that he was. He looked into the distance and said that S++ shouldn't be a problem. He was going to. The guy shrouded himself in an aura and answered in the affirmative. He pierced the ice with his magical attack. The guy turned back. Mana looked at him and asked him to be careful. The ice gargoyle ran past the squad. The girl added that there were other people here. An image of fire appeared. The guy said that the verdict was hot air. The monster turned back. He was struck by Minato's fire attack. Koriyama's eyes widened in shock. A guy was standing behind him. He was holding a sword in his hand. He thought that he had a fiery sword. Mana looked at him. An image of the marks of Suho's sword swings appeared. The captain stood calmly in the middle of the battlefield. He put the sword behind his back and thought that was understandable. Midori was talking about it. In the middle of the icy tundra stood an igloo. Suho's squad was resting in it. Mana asked how Koriyama was. He ate noodles with chopsticks and replied that not very much. The boss was not within a radius of 10 kilometers. The girl took off her mask and said she thought they had no choice but to spend the night here. The main character was sitting by the fire. She asked what was going by the way, where the captain and Minato were. The guy closed his eyes. He held a flaming sword above his head and thought that in the fight with Banto, he had mastered the fusion of skills. An image of two hands with spheres appeared. He added that even opposite skills. The protagonist opened his eyes abruptly and said that he could tie them up. Suko stood behind him and explained that he was busy training and asked what he had distracted him. He replied that he had not, thinking to himself that he had frightened him by silently approaching. A fire was burning in the middle of the snowfield. The captain asked that this was his first trip. He replied that it was. He sat down next to the guy and wondered if it was difficult for him. The guy replied that he was in anticipation. Dryly lowered his eyes to the fire and said that he would like to return home as soon as possible. A drop of sweat slipped down the cheek of the main character. He explained that he had an addiction. The guy added that because of tobacco. The captain added that it was a cat. A cat was lying on the bed next to Suho. He put his hands on his face and said that he wanted to breathe in a cat. The guy asked what a drug. He sat dryly with his head down. The guy said that he had an animal in him and asked that he was like a child. He replied that yes, he was the same. The captain sat down closer to him. The guy looked at him and thought that he was very close. He announced that he should look. The cat stared at the phone camera. Minato said he was cute and asked what his name was. The guy took the phone. He replied that it was Mantu. The cat frowned at the camera. The guy asked what was wrong with her. Look at the photos. She missed her so much. The captain replied that not at all. An image appeared with everyday situations with a cat. Suko noted that no matter how much he cleaned, the clothes were constantly in hair, the walls were all scratched, and he was scarred. And she also did not like to be held in his arms, and so on every day. The captain held the phone in his hand and said that she did not open her heart to him. She looked so much like Shinji. The guy thought that he loved cats so much. He looked down and added that someday, he might be able to be close to Shinji as well. Minato turned his head on him and said that he was the only child in the family, so he didn't really understand. The guy shook his head. He looked at the captain and noted that just as he did with Mantu, he cared about Shinji. The captain looked at him. He smiled slightly and replied that it was understandable. The young man took the phone and noticed that there was also a video here. How cute. His eyes widened in bewilderment. Someone's hand was playing with a cat. The guy turned to the captain and argued that she was really like a child. He replied that yes, like an angel, and said that it was understandable. If so, then okay. I looked at the guy coldly and asked if he had trained before. Mana came up behind them and told them to come back and go to bed, and to go out early tomorrow. There was snow on the trees. The captain replied that he understood. Someone was walking in the snow in slippers. Tonight, Minato and the rest of Suko's squad don't know. A man in climbing gear ran after him and told him to wait. If he climbed the mountain, he would die. A flashlight was shining on his head. He asked that he was not a person with a Transcendent, and that he was on a mission. He replied that yes, something like a task. The guy was holding a blue book with a golden seal in his hand. He added that this was the place of prophecy, an important mission. He went on, and a Transcendent climbs a mountain. The young man was on his knee with the bowstring drawn. Minato's sleep during the night training. Today is the final lesson, concentration in archery. Margit stood on his chest and said that for 25 hours, he did not know when the target would appear, and for Minato to be more attentive. The meaning of the training was revealed at the end, when the general concentration disappeared from fatigue. Hinoki threw up his hands and asked why Melees had replied that they had practiced yesterday without fencing. The guy held the bow taut. Hinoki added that so what? Margit said that the noise shouldn't distract him. He was doing pretty well for the first time. Oji looked at him and said that it was now. Koriyama looked up and said that his radar had picked up the enemy. He looked in front of him. A sword was stuck in the head of the ice monster. She added that the estimated score of the monsters, SS++ level, there are about 30 of them. He dryly tucked the slash behind his back. The guy explained that it was an amazing team, because they participate together on missions. The protagonist held an arrow and said that he had to try. The arrow flew far ahead. It pierced the invisible barrier. The guy looked at her in shock. He lay on his back. Margit announced that he should remember this feeling. And that was all for today. The guy thanked him. Hinoki asked what they were done. He drew his sword and said that until he woke up, he would be with him. Minato stood behind the squad in front of Suho. They were standing on an ice platform. The captain stated that they were continuing. The guy looked at him. He looked into the distance, and said that today they would find and defeat the boss of this prophecy. Ice spikes were sticking out of the ground, frozen ground, the second day of the mission. Koriyama flew in front of Mana and said that 150 meters out of 20 pieces. The girl added that they would strike. Birds were flying in the sky. An image of a bird shone on the screen. Iowa painted her nails and said that it seemed like an easy victory. Raylak explained that the people around him are strong. It shouldn't be like last time. Melees looked at the old man and asked how he was. Kodo scratched his beard and said he didn't know yet. Minato held a sword in his hand, Kodo adding that he didn't feel so uncomfortable now. Suko's squad stood together. Someone shouted that the cleansing was over. The captain said he thanked him for his efforts. An image of the starry sky appeared. Suho asked for a report from Koriyama, who replied that 2,000 from here. A strong recoil, probably the boss. Ice spikes protruded from the ground. The guy noted that it was approaching. He looked up and said a collision in 10-9, no. A huge boss with swords in his hands landed in front of him. The veins on his face are swollen. Mana narrowed her eyes and wondered what kind of mana it was. The captain stood in the middle of the field and ordered a combat start. Koriyama tied the boss's hands with a thread. Mana flew by. The guy stretched out his arms in front of him. Fire shot out from the magic circle. The girl stared at the damaged blade and thought that even with such attacks, there was not a single damage. Calmandez bared her teeth. Minato jumped over the boss and swung his sword. Hinoko had a bandage on his face. He told him to forget about his fears and doubts, and looked straight at his opponent. Shinomiya stretched out her hand and stated that the strongest attack was reserved for the strongest enemy and avoided successive blows. The guy looked at the boss and thought that he could use the most powerful attack now. The plume from his attack froze in the air, the verdict of the hot air. Calmandez covered her face with her hands for protection. The guy looked at her in shock. The bandages on her arm were smoking slightly. The guy thought that it did not work. He gritted his teeth under the pressure of the boss's attack. Shards of ice flew from the boss. The guy fell into the snow. Koriyama asked if he was alive. He thought that if it weren't for the ice behind him. Mana narrowed her eyes and thought that was why the prophecy was the first class. She looked ahead and remembered the captain. He took his sword with his hand. He looked at the boss and said that everything was fine. Koriyama tied up Minato and asked him to duck, and whatever he did, he would only interfere with the captain. Calmandez swung her hand with her sword. She launched a magical attack on Suho. The guy looked at this and called out to the captain. The boss opened her eyes in shock. He replied that he understood. He stood in front of the cracked blade of Calmandez and announced that of course she was strong. Suko looked up. Koriyama said that they often say. Mana noted that Suho, the captain, always acting on his own. The guy thought that this was not the best image for a vice captain. In front of the captain stood the boss. He blocked the attack with his sword. A swing of his blade instantly sliced through Calmanda's arms and weapons. Hinako looked at him and said that even for a Transcendent, it was interesting and that he would watch him fight, and asked Minato, who thought that he had no effect. The boss moved her severed limbs. Suho said that he wanted everyone present to participate in the boss fight. He looked at him resolutely and added that they should make him lose. Two soldiers put out their hands. The captain swung his sword to attack the boss. Skill, God Emperor Red Dragon. In the abyss of fire there was a barrier with a detachment. Suko carefully watched the movement of the boss. A flash of red color. The fire from the guy's attack covered the entire battlefield. The fire spread rapidly around the area. The guy opened his mouth in surprise. Part of Calmandez's torso was burned. A drop of sweat slid down the guy's cheek. He noted that the flaming sword, but Calmandez covered her face with her hands for protection. The fire from the guy's attack covered the entire battlefield. The guy added that he was much stronger than him, and that without the barrier, they would have turned into ashes. The captain stood in the middle of the field and said that he was sorry. Minato noted that it was Suho's ability. He held a sword on his shoulder and added that it was his job to protect all the cats in the world. The guy thought that the captain was really obsessed with him. The blue-nosed guy cut through the battlefield with his magical attack. The guy noted that even Hinoko's swordsmanship was different. With every breath of a blow, he was not even close. A drop of sweat slid down Minato's cheek. Dryly holding his sword in his right hand, Minato thinking that he wanted to learn more from him. Part of the body of the boss Calmandez flew off the battlefield. Koriyama happily raised his hands in the air as a sign of victory over the boss. Blood gushed from Captain Suko's hand. He stared at his hand. The captain turned back. Behind him under the barrier stood his entire detachment. A hole appeared in Koriyama's body. Minato looked around in shock at all the members of the squad. He widened his eyes in surprise and asked what had happened. The protagonist ran up to his squad mate. He narrowed his eyes and said that he was a fool. Koriyama pushed Minato aside with his right hand. The guy looked at him in shock. Blood gushed out of the body of the yellow-haired guy. The captain turned to the rest of the squad under the barrier. The guy thought that this attack, his defense, should have worked. Koriyama reached out to the captain and asked him to forgive him. The defeated guy collapsed to the ground and thought that nevertheless the enemy got him here, and if he noticed it. Koriyama smiled slightly at Captain Suho. He gritted his teeth in deep resentment. Next to Mana, the captain began to fall, looked at the ground and told everyone to go around and retreat. Minato was on his knees in shock, Suho adding that this is his ability. Two bloody corpses lay in the snow. Mana looked at the squad member holding on to his shoulder. Blood gushed from his hand. He noted that it was the hand of the head. The captain dropped dryly to one knee. Blood gushed out of his hand. He thought that this was an attack that could not be prevented even with barriers. Perhaps it was his tendency to destroy anything he touched. He narrowed his eyes. The captain abruptly flew off the battlefield. Mana looked at him and called out to him. The recovered boss Calmandez stood up to her full height. Mana took the sword in her hands and thought, if the leader needed to recover, then they would be able to cope on their own, and ordered Minato to move. She turned to the main character. He was desperately on his knees. He looked somewhere in the distance and whispered the name of his comrade in a low voice. He stared glassy eyes at the corpses and asked if she could resuscitate them. The girl lowered her eyes and asked him for forgiveness. She opened her eyes slightly and added that it was all because of her ability. Bloody body parts lay on the snow. The girl added that she had destroyed the bodies so much that they could not be restored. The guy was standing in the middle of the field and said that this is how it is. The three creators silently watched their fight. The guy slowly pronounced their names. Hinoko had a bandage hanging over his face. Minato, lying on his back, continued to hold his sword. Hinoko held out his sword in front of him. Minato repeated his pose, thinking that Hinoko had helped him in the battle with Banto. The guy looked somewhere in the distance and said that next time he would do everything himself. The protagonist looked glassy eyes at the corpses of his comrades and asked him for forgiveness. Hinoko furrowed his brows and reported that he understood. The guy continued to kneel in the snow. His hair is dyed blue. The captain flew dryly through the frozen valley and thought that the enemy, whom even Koriyama could not detect, was unthinkable. The radar operated within a radius of 3 kilometers. It was outside the range of this range. He needed to look for him outside. The captain turned to the rest of the squad under the barrier, and I noted that I had pierced his arm and Koriyama with a single blow. In other words, the enemy was attacking. The captain's eyes widened in surprise. Soho usually encourages the other participants to take the initiative. A sword hung on his back, but now he suppresses them. Ice spikes protruded from the ground. Suko was rapidly moving towards the point of attack. In the middle of the ice spikes, an unidentified figure stood, having traveled 3 kilometers to find a hidden enemy. A guy with a tail on his head was standing in the snow. Koriyama held his wands in his hand. Hizano looked at the game board. Kawas was stroking the cat. Miromi put out his hand for arm wrestling. Captain Soho's eyes widened and thought that their deaths would not be in vain. The captain waved the ball. A red flash. A black sphere appeared in the air. In the crater was number 12. He asked that he had found it, as expected from the strongest Captain Soho. Kapian looked down and thought that he would use the incision with flames. The blonde guy looked up at the captain and said that if he had his left arm now, he would be dead. Darkness. Dryly holding the sword in his right hand, 12th added that he had no other choice. Black spheres appeared in front of him, and he declared that he should die. Dryly swung his right hand with a sword to attack. With a swing of his sword, he lifted the snow in front of him. 12 looked at him in shock. Behind him, Captain Soho appeared with a sword. He attacked him in the neck. He looked dryly at his broken sword. The light-haired guy turned to him and announced that well, just cut off his head. Dryly fell to his knees. 12th added that he was one step closer to defeat. He gritted his teeth dryly in anger. 12 dodged his attack. He kicked him in the body and asked him that it was a waste of time, wasn't it? Blood gushed out of Suko's mouth and said that this is how it is. The blonde guy looked at Soho's sword flying at him in shock. The ice broke from the captain's attack. Captain Suko turned to look at the rest of the party in the barrier. Minato looked at the captain in shock. In the crater from Suko's attack stood the 12th. Black spheres appeared in front of him. He wondered why he had hit him now without erasing it. He was aiming from here and was able to stop the attack. The ability to instantly erase the target is too simple, and inquired that the number of shots is limited. Yes. 12 jumped out of the snow, Suko announcing that he was also tired. He kept his hands in his pocket and said something like that, but not like him. A hole appeared in the captain's body dryly. 12 said that his inferiority would not be restored. And the captain was bleeding. He asked him again about his inferiority. Behind the captain stood his squad. He held a sword in his hands and said that there were 3 rules in the Soho clan. He crouched down abruptly to attack. 12 looked at him in shock and thought that he had jumped his wound. The captain's hand burned dryly. He explained that the 3rd rule is that obstacles recede into the background. He raised his sword in front of him. God Emperor Red Dragon. A black sphere appeared in the air, and 12 asked that he wanted to burn them. He put his hands out and added that he should try darkness. Suko's entire squad was assembled. Blood was flowing from the captain's mouth. He told him not to underestimate Soho's squad. Makoto holding a sword with his mouth open. God Emperor Red Dragon. A flash of red color. In front of the 12th, black spheres are soaring. Darkness. The hero's face looks at the ground. He asks Hinoki for one last wish and says that he relies on all of them. One-eyed frowning, responded with understanding. Minato is on his knees. His black hair is dyed white. Mana holds her sword tensely. Someone screams loudly, she curses. The 4-armed woman opens her mouth in a rage. The blue-haired girl says to herself that she still has strength, but she cannot cope alone. Mana, looking back, loudly calls out to the protagonist. She notes to herself that the guy does not move. With 2 dead bodies lying on the ground, Yellow Eyes speculates that he has lost all of his fighting spirit due to the death of the others. After which she notes that this is not surprising, as he wasn't even a hunter recently. The girl opens her eyes in surprise. Minato gets up from his knees. He stands looking into the distance. The wind tears the hood off Mana. She pronounces the name of the hero. The guy kicks down the 4-armed monster. Isla lifts her glowing yellow leg behind the hero. The blue-haired girl looks at Minato in surprise. He slowly walks away from his teammates. Behind the hero appear his teachers. They claim that he can leave the rest to them. Makoto's body is covered in fire. He raises his sword behind his back. The guy's swings create flying blades out of fire. A fiery slash. 12 dodges the attack. His face is sweating. He notes to himself that it was close. An image of the interaction of darkness with fire appeared. The blonde thinks to himself that even if he attacks a fire strike, it will still recover. After which he notes that he can only use darkness at a certain distance. 12, sweating profusely, mentally makes a guess. It triggers 2 realms of darkness. Makoto dodges the attack. The red-haired man, pushing off the ground, mentally notes that now is the time to attack. He cuts off the blonde's hand. The guy, opening his mouth wide, declares that the situation has turned against the 12th. The blonde smiles. He kicks the swordsman's hand with his knee and rejoices loudly. Blood escapes Makoto's mouth. A guy with a circle on his chest, holding on to a severed limb, claims that the red-haired man made a mistake, because he still has a hole in his body. 12's right hand is burning in the fire. He says that he was exactly the right moment to attack with darkness, because he knew that the guy would want to strike at close range. Makoto rushes forward with a red plume behind, the blonde declaring that the swordsman is indeed strong, and always chooses the best technique, and all his strikes are breathless. He adds that despite this, he is easy to read. The blonde man stands in the center of the crater. The swordsman raises the wind with his vertical swing. He attacks a light guy with a sword on his back. 12, smiling broadly, declares that victory is his. The red-haired man is breathing heavily. The blonde, reaching for his remaining hand in his bag, says that in other words, the swordsman's defeat was a foregone conclusion from the start. The blonde man shows a blue book and claims that it was in it that the prediction was. Makoto, staring at the book in amazement, makes a guess about it out loud. An image of a red book with a golden symbol appears. The swordsman is surprised to declare that it is a book of prophecies. 12th opens the book with a smile. Midori and Makoto stand in front of a golden diamond. A group of unknown people are in front of the golden circle symbol. The blonde man reveals that if there is an organization that prevents prophecies, then there will inevitably be those who fulfill them. The swordsman's face sweats profusely. He is silently surprised at the existence of the organization. The blonde man, holding the blue book with his remaining hand in front of him, declares that he is one of the apostles of the apocalypse, and adds that he is the 12th darkness. He continues to look at Makoto and says that he is the one who will fulfill the prophecy. The swordsman, holding his sword to the ground, asks why the deadly prophecy should be fulfilled. The 12th, closing the book, asks if they will let him go if he tells. The red-haired man swings his sword vertically and sends the blonde man out. The blonde man looks at the deep cut on his shoulder. Makoto, watching his opponent's wound, says to himself that he lost, and adds that there should be no more tricks on his part, after which he thinks that his strength is running out. The swordsman is covered in fire. He is convinced of his victory, the red dragon. 12, smiling, puts his hand back in his bag. In his palm there is a small blue bottle. The blonde opens the lid in the shape of an angel. His body shines with a bright light. Makoto squints. 12 hits him in the face with his right hand. The body of the red-haired man is forcefully imprinted into the post. The red-haired man looks at the blonde man in surprise. 12 clutches his regrown right hand, and the swordsman remembers in amazement that it was gone. A blue bottle with an angel cap is revealed. The blonde reveals that it is an artifact, and adds that he did not want to use it, as it is very valuable. Makoto makes a fire cut. 12 blocks the attack with darkness. He unleashes a series of punches on the red-haired man and thinks to himself that he is an idiot since he has fully recovered. An image of many monsters is shown. The swordsman is silently amazed by the artifact, and adds that the artificial artifacts are so powerful that they are stored in the Tower of Time, after which he is surprised that someone possesses such a thing. 12, smiling, kicks Makoto in the side. Blood is flowing. The red-haired man lies on the ground. The blonde declares that he lost. A red stream flows from the swordsman's mouth. He reaches for the sword with his remaining hand. Makoto's parents smile. He realizes to himself that he still has something to fulfill. A boy holding a soccer ball with tears. Young Midori smiles. A lot of people in black robes are smiling happily. The protagonist, smiling, tells the swordsman that he is an only child, so he does not really understand, and asks about the fact that the red-haired man cares about Shinji as much as he cares about Mantu. Makoto, smiling with blood on his face, says that Minato was right. The wounded guy grabs his sword. In his memories, he gives his brother a cat. Shinji reaches out to meet the Fluffy. The swordsman raises the blade behind his back to strike. The guy's palm is destroyed along with the handle. 12 creates many dark spheres and bids farewell to Makoto. The red-haired man is on his knees. The hero destroys the pillar behind the blonde. A drop of water falls on the protagonist's palm. He clenches his fist with a bright blue symbol. The teachers shine a yellow light behind Minato and tell the 12th that he will pay for the white-haired boy's tears. The swordsman, kneeling without both hands, is silently surprised by the appearance of the main character. A large blue glow emanates from the hero. Makoto suspects to himself that it is not him, but someone else. 12th observes the protagonist. The red-haired one notes that he also noticed the changes in the hero. A dark sphere appears. The blonde says to himself that there was only a boy in front of him. But now he is no longer a rabbit driven into a corner, but a bloodthirsty hunter ready to kill. After which he thinks about the best solution in this situation. The blonde loudly demands not to move. 12's left arm separates from his body, declaring that if the hero moves even a little, he will kill the swordsman. The bright guy makes a surprised face from realization. Looking at the hero, he thinks about the fact that he did not even blink an eye, and asks himself how it happened. 12's hand falls down. He wonders to himself when Minato even managed to do this. The protagonist holds a sword near the ground on bent legs. In his right hand is a broken blade. Hinoki, standing next to the white-haired guy, states that this was expected. The clique next to him talking about how they are brandishing a sword. A man in glasses, raising his hand with a bright yellow symbol, talks about his turn. A wave of metallic color rises, the highest alchemy. A lot of metal weapons circle around the hero and the gray-haired man. A man in glasses talks about the creation of weapons. The clique, taking a serious look, declares that it is ready to create it as long as they wish. The hand of the 12th with a blue glow is restored. Hinoki, observing this, aloud assumes that he has regeneration. Melee's next to him says that this is a rollback, then aloud suggests that modern transcendents have skills of this level. An image of a white bottle with a cap in the shape of an angel is shown. The red-haired girl believes that perhaps this is an artifact that allows you to recover a certain number of times. A metal arrow pierces the 12th's forehead. The hero, holding a bow behind him and Margit, declares that he will look again. A blonde man with a healed head twists his face. A dark-skinned man with glasses, crossing his arms, asks what the plan is, to which the red-haired girl suggests continuing to kill the blonde, and adds that someday he will definitely die. 12, summoning many black orbs, cries out for darkness. The hero releases the string of a metal bow with 3 blue arrows. The blonde makes a frightened face from the projectile in front of his face. He throws his head back due to metal objects hitting his eye and chest. The protagonist holds his bow. Margit, aiming at the 12th, declares that it will not help him. The blonde, making a frightened face, curses. He launches spheres of darkness at the hero. The young man, together with a dark-skinned man in glasses, dodges the attack. Minato grabs the light guy's right hand. The white-haired man kicks his chin. The hero continues to hold the 12th. The main character strikes the opponent in the face. The dark man, creating arrows, says that they will certainly hit the body, and that on the one hand, shooting is a good skill. The blonde man stands behind the many spheres. The man in glasses notes that the projectiles will not be able to hit through the darkness. The warrior with the long pigtail, frowning his gaze, notes that even so, they can bypass the blonde's attack. The hero grabs the 12th. The protagonist tosses it into the air. Isla looks at the sky with a palm over her eyes. A dark-skinned man asks how many times the blonde has already died. The girl asks in response if he wants to count. Minato approaches an injured Makoto. The swordsman looks at the hero and clarifies if it is really him. The red-haired man is kneeling in front of the white-haired guy. A blonde girl with glasses stands behind the protagonist with her hand raised, and refuses. Makoto's body is covered in a golden glow, sustaining life. Minato, passing by the red-haired man, states that they are the creators and are now inside the guy's body, after which the spirit is introduced. The hero, disappearing in front of the wounded warrior, claims that he will soon return. The swordsman, looking ahead, talks about the creators. 12 crouches near the ice wall, and thinks about the hero's words that his darkness is easy to avoid, then adds that it is impossible, and also adds to himself that it is impossible. He, frowning heavily, says aloud that he needs to come up with something. The spear pierces the blonde's heart. The protagonist impales the body of the blonde with a metal lance. 12, coughing up blood from a wound in his chest, he realizes to himself that there is no more time to think. The muscular woman shifts her gaze and asks if they will shoot the light guy until he dies. Melees responds with a denial. The blonde man lands on the ground near a spear and a block of ice. The green-haired woman agrees to the red-haired girl. 2 yellow flashes appear. The hero, sealing the 12th in the ground with a bright light, talks about how problematic he is. Isla, being behind the protagonist, asks how many pieces the blonde needs to be shredded for him to stop living. The blonde's right palm lies on the ground. A fully recovered guy with a pigtail is breathing heavily. As he runs away, he thinks to himself that he must spit on the kid and that he must hurry to kill Makoto. 12's face is sweating. The red-haired man continues to kneel. The protagonist, sitting on the ground in front of the swordsman, tells the blonde that he is too late. Minato smiles widely. The blonde man, watching the white-haired guy, wonders aloud what the guy tells him to look at more closely. The main character, together with Hinoki behind his back, swings his sword. The protagonist inflicts many blows on the guy with circles on his chest. 12's face was cut in half. The symbol of the golden circle appears. The blonde thinks that he has dedicated his life to fulfilling the prophecy, and adds that he cannot die now. A huge shark opens its mouth in front of the blonde man. He says to himself that this immense power in front of him makes his heart shrink, then adds that the fear he threw away has reappeared. A blue glow is shining. The guy is thinking about the prophecy to which he devoted his life. Putting his left hand into his bag, he declares to himself that for the sake of this prediction he must throw away all fears. 12 takes out a bottle with yellow contents. Minato and Hinoki make a surprised look. A blonde man with a severed hand scatters sand from a vial, an artifact of a cage of time. The hero is inside the golden bars. Blood covers the earth. The blonde man claims aloud that he has run out of time to regenerate. He opens his mouth wide, silently rejoicing that he did it, and managed to do it at the last second. Hinoki looks up, and Melees states that it is a cell created by an artifact. A red-haired girl creates a glowing green ball in her palm, and asks what they will do. A one-eyed man looks at 12. The blonde's severed hand lies on the ground next to the bottle. The fencing master claims aloud that it has stopped recovering. The blonde man, holding on to his wound, says that even his darkness cannot break through this cage, after which he declares to the hero that since he is now caught, he will not be able to kill him. The blonde, with his mouth wide open, says that there is no way out of there, and adds that they have a draw. Hinoki, looking at 12, reminds him of something. Makoto stands behind the blonde man, the one-eyed man explaining that he means the swordsman. The guy in the blue shirt turns around. The red-haired man frowns at him. The boy looks at the broken weapon and realizes that he cannot defeat Makoto with his sword alone. The child turned around and suggested that he could be a genius like him, and whether he should find a teacher, and he also thought, following the advice of the greatest Transcendent, he decided to look for a teacher and become a disciple of those whom he considered the best. The man turned around and said that he was much stronger than him. The old man leaned over and said that he had nothing to teach him. The figure stands and advises him to look for another partner. The man turned his head, and he remembered that he felt helpless again, because every time he found a new teacher, they were weaker than him. The guy put his hand on the girl's shoulder and said that from that day on, he would study with her, because she was the best swordsman among his students, as well as his sister. Hinoki tilted her head. The swords are stuck in the ground, and the narrator explained that he studied with the last mentor for 3 years. The red-haired man approached the mentor and asked a question about the technique. The symbol is depicted on the page. The girl raised her head and replied that he did not own it herself. The man holds a sword, and the mentor reveals that only the creator, Hinoki, was able to master it. Makoto looked at the book. The teacher stands in front of the young man and says that she has nothing more to teach him, because she taught him everything she knew. The guy raised his head and asked how he could get stronger. The girl closed her eyes. A picture of a flower appeared, and the tutor said that his talent was great, but even so, after so much training, he was just a bud, and added that he could find new mentors, continue to fight and cultivate, but he would not be able to blossom as long as he was alive. The guy looks ahead. Makoto raised his head and remembered the words that one day, he would meet a swordsman who would be stronger than him. The red-haired man looks at the swordsman. The young man holds a blade, and Makoto remembered his mentor's words that such an opportunity comes only once in a lifetime and should not be missed. The guy lowered his hands and thanked the teacher, because he understood. A red aura enveloped the swordsman's body, who realized that this was happening now. The girl turned and asked what he was doing. The man looks ahead. The swordsmen are standing. The protagonist raised his head and said the name of the red-haired man. A golden sphere surrounds the youth with a blue aura. The sun illuminates the building, the main department of the training camp. The guy lowered his head. The red-haired man looks ahead and tries to figure out what it is. The guy is trying to hold back his energy. The girl stands and shouts what this rumble is. Light enters through the hole, and someone has spoken Midori's name. An aura surrounds Makoto's body. The opponent raised his head. For a moment, the 12th's heart froze. The captain lowered his head like a swordsman. Makoto was nothing else. The man looks ahead with horror, but for some reason, the feeling that he will be killed did not disappear. The long-haired man turned and addressed the hero. The trees are standing, and the man explained that it takes only a moment for a person to blossom, in the most literal sense of the word. The swordsman stood there, and the mentor continued to wonder if it would happen when his body was fully strengthened. The old man turned around, and Hinoki added that he would open up when he mastered all the techniques. The girl looks away, and the man said that this can happen and when he reaches his limit. The captain is standing without hands, and the mentor summed up that as for Makoto, his time is now. Hinoki raised his head and said that the hero should remember this moment. The protagonist looks forward. The red-haired man exhaled. Makoto stands in front of a flower. The captain swung. The young man raised his head. The antagonist's eyes widened. Makoto raised his hands for a punch. The flower blossomed. The man was cut in two, the Hinoki technique, a complete loss, a cut. Makoto swung and realized that he had to put up a barrier from the topic, and he had neither hands nor a sword. Blood gushed out of the enemy's wound, and Kabuto realized that it would kill it right like that. The two halves of the body fall to the sides. One Eye tilted his head and said that it was excellent. The captain looks ahead. Makoto began to fall. The red-haired man looks forward and realizes that he has sensed this, felt like he is no longer connected to the sword. An image of a swordsman appeared, who realized that although he was standing under a sky covered with clouds, it was now pure and bright for him. Makoto looks up and tries to figure out if he could ever reach such a level as a swordsman. The man closed his eyes. The guy is standing with his parents. Midori turned. The team is standing, and Makoto realizes that he is constantly running from family, friends, teammates and subordinates. He has simply distanced himself from them, trying to become better. The man raised his head and realized that he was now here. A young man is standing with a cat. The captain turned and apologized to his brother, because now he was completely satisfied. Someone is coming. The red-haired man looks away. The protagonist approached the captain. The guy held out his hand. The swordsman looks ahead in shock. The man smiled. As the hands moved closer together, Makoto realizes that even though he is dead, this is not the end. People shook hands, and the captain said that he relied on the hero. The young man falls. The protagonist runs to the captain and realizes that for a moment, his soul was connected to Captain Makoto through the heavenly crest. The guy stretches his hand forward and shouts the captain's name. The hero fell to the ground. Someone looks away. Dead bodies lie on the ground. Midori flies and shouts the name of his comrade. The blonde man picked up his friend's body. Sweat runs down his face. The man smiles. Midori sits next to a dead friend, Makoto, 23 years old, who died in a battle with a Transcendent named 12. Minato lies on the ground. The brothers sit together. A dead Makoto smiles. Midori sits next to his friend and tries to figure out why. The guy lowered his head. The young man took a step and asked why Makoto decided to become a captain. The man wipes away the sweat and asks what he means. The friend threw the bottle and explained that he was almost as strong as him, and if he trained harder, no one would be his equal. Makoto caught the bottle, and Midori tried to figure out if it was better to fight alone. The light reflects off the floor, and the red-haired man said that it looked like him, to which the comrade sarcastically asked what he thought he couldn't work in a team. The guy looks ahead. A star burns in the sky, and the captain said that although he is far away for all of them, he continues to illuminate them like the brightest star and they need people like him. The man put on his shirt and tried to say something. An image appeared on the screen, and a voice spoke to the captain. The guys are standing and the young man said that Kuzushiro passed the second-level swordsman exam, just as the captain said. The guy raised his head and explained that now he could be useful, but still wanted to tell about it himself. The man turned around, and a team member said that they were going to eat. Makona looked up and realized that he loved his boys. The guy looks at the captain, who added that he would like to take care of them until he dies. The man took a step forward and says that it is happiness to meet them in your life. The guy lowered his head and said that while he was walking here, he met his comrades. The figures are standing, and the Midori revealed that only 2 of them survived. The young man put his hand on his friend's face. The blonde man turned around and said with tears in his eyes that he had done his duty as a captain. A dead Makoto smiles, and his comrade adds that he did something he couldn't. The young man hugged his friend and congratulated Makoto. The body lies on the ground. The protagonist is lying. The swordsman looked at the hero. The girl raised her head and said that it was dark. The pink-haired woman looks forward. The hero is on his knees, and the girl guessed that he believes that the current situation is a consequence of his weakness. An image of the protagonist's acquaintances appeared, and the pink-haired woman explained that everyone experiences the death of partners, friends, family, because even the creators went through this difficult experience. Someone stretches out his hand, and the narrator continued that as a result, a wound appears and all that remains is to look at the backs of the departing friends. The long-haired man looks down, and the girl said that most of the time no one can bear it, and they closed their hearts. The man approached the guy. The hero lowered his head and said that he would not fight anymore. People look forward in shock. The protagonist put his hand to his chest and said that his heart hurts as if it was about to burst. A picture of the battle appeared, and Minata said that if he had only relied on them from the beginning, then no one would have died. The hero sits and says that he just has to train his body so that everyone can use it as a vessel. The swordsman took a step forward, and the guy said that he understood with his head. The young man raised his head. The captain held out his hand. The protagonist shook hands. The young man looked at the palm and said that when the captain held out his hand, it was so hot that it even burned. The hero turned around and explained that he trusted him. The guy raised his head and added that he wanted to live up to his expectations. Chubby looks forward. The bespectacled girl began to cry. The lizard raised its head. A dark-skinned man wipes away his tears. The man closed his eyes. The long-haired man smiled. Margit raised his head. The old man looks ahead. Someone adjusted his glasses. The man tries not to cry. The girl looked up. The pink-haired woman opened her mouth. The long-haired man smiles, and the protagonist said that he no longer thinks that he will ever get better than the creators, because they surpass everyone else every minute and second. The guy raised his head. A flash lit up the sky. The light illuminated the main character. The young man clenched his fist. Minato looked ahead and stated that he would not lose again. The helicopter is flying. People drag their comrades. Midori is carried by Makoto. The young man closes the bag with the captain's body. The man took a step and said that everyone was ready and only Midori remained, to which the latter replied that he would return alone. The girl turned and told him to be careful. The guy picked up the phone and turned to Mikado. The young man looked at the book and told them that Makoto had left them. The symbol is depicted on the book, and Midori explained that his enemy was the 12th apostle of the apocalypse and added that the report with permission could wait. The young man looked furiously ahead and said that he was hunting them, and Mr. Midori did not return again. People fight against the backdrop of a volcano. 1 month later, in Amitakiyama, Nagano Prefecture, the red-haired man took a fighting stance. The guy made a lunge. The young man raised his hand to strike. The protagonist used a piercing blow. Shinji exhaled. People are standing in the water. The hero looks at his hand and realizes that he stopped his piercing blow. The guy grabbed his opponent's hand. Minato threw the opponent over. Shinji flies down. The red-haired man struck, kicked. The young man blocked his leg with his hand. Shinji looks ahead. The protagonist swung for a kick. Someone tilted his head and shouted for them to stop. The children look at their mentor. The girl crossed her arms. The portrait of the captain is standing. People in costumes stand at the funeral, and the protagonist explained that Makoto's death was a big scar on the hearts of each of them. The hero looked away. The red-haired man looks forward. Shinji stands in front of a portrait of his dead brother, and the guy said that among all those who came to the funeral, only Shinji did not leave the photo of the captain. Minato walks down the hallway. The young man raised his head. The red-haired man took a step. The young man raised his head and noticed the hero, and someone meowed. The cat is sitting in the carrier, and the protagonist realized that this sound was made by Mantu. Shinji raised his head and said that the hero knew that his brother had a cat. The red-haired man lowered his head and said that he didn't know anything. The young man is standing in the room and began his story by saying that after cleaning the room, he understood something. The cat is lying on the wardrobe, and the young man said that he loved him like no one else. The books are on the shelf, and Shinji explained that his brother read them. The clothes are hanging, and the young man said that he wore them. The food is in the refrigerator. The notes hang on the refrigerator, and Shinji admits that he hasn't started sorting out his item yet. The hero looks ahead. The young man holds the books, and Minato realizes that they are diaries, to which his brother states that he is allowed to take them. An image of the text appeared, and the protagonist revealed that his brother had left a suicide note in case he died. The guy looks at the book, and the young man added that he wrote about his daily workouts and responsibilities. Red-haired looks at the text in shock, where it was written that on January 12th, it gets colder in the morning and evening, and he wonders if Shinji is cold. The hand turned the page to March 7th. The brother is standing near the diary, where Makoto wrote that Shinji passed the hunter exam, because he wants to become like him. On April 17th, he is worried that Shinji joined the opposing squad. On July 19th, today Kashiai brought a delicious watermelon. It's a pity that Shinji didn't try it. Red Hair looks forward, and Makoto described October 1st when Shinji went on a reconnaissance mission to learn about the prophecy. Tears fell on a piece of paper that said he hoped his brother would be safe. The man writes in his diary. The young man lies on the floor and realizes that he has never forgotten about him. A guy cries with the diary. The protagonist raised his head. The man turned around and said that he cherished his brother. The captain looks down and says that if only he could communicate with Shinji as well. The guy cries and the hero says that Makoto always talked about him and Mantu. The young man raised his head and said that he wanted to become stronger. The stars illuminate the night sky, and the red-haired man explained that he needed strength so that his brother could not worry about him. The girl turned and asked why they were there. The girl stood in shock when she heard that Makoto had died. The mentor made a calm face and said that she understood. The guys stand and ask if she can train them. Hinoki stands on the shore and notices that they have both become better and adds that a month ago Minato was much better than him. But Shinji has grown up a lot, to which the young man thanked his mentor, and the protagonist wanted to hear about himself, to which the girl did not know what to say to him. The girl kicked the sticks. The guys caught a wooden weapon. The mentor leaned over and said that she was now their target. Hinoki smiled and whispered for them to attack. An aura enveloped the bodies of his comrades. The protagonist swung at the girl and thought that he wanted to become stronger. Energy circles around the hero who wants to become stronger than anyone. An unknown person is walking down the street. England, London. The man went around the corner. The stranger stopped. The villain smiled and said that he was one of the 12 apostles of the apocalypse, namely the fourth. The man turned and asked why he had come to see him. Midori lowered his head. The guy looks down and tells him to tell him where the rest of the apostles are, and if he says anything different, he will die. A red aura enveloped the body of the villain, who said that there was no need to rush and it was better to have fun. The guy silently looks ahead. The lamp illuminates the alley. Blood rushed to the ground. Midori came around the corner. The young man took a step and repeated what he had told him he would kill. The blonde handed over the book. Midori walks gloomily forward, and the man said it was the seventh, hand holding books. The young man raised his head and said that they were going for the next one. Someone is holding a bull, the headquarters of the resistance. The sun illuminates the building, the top secret meeting place, Iganin. Books are lying around. The chief inspector of the Prophecy Suppression Department, Io, tilted her head and assumed that it was from Midori. Assistant Inspector Tenjin bowed his head and confirmed the old woman's assumption and added that the Book of Prophecies was in the possession of the 12 apostles of the apocalypse. Inspector Shiki's assistant looked ahead and added that it had originally been a single volume, but had since been divided into several books. The old lady looked at the book and said that he was eliminating enemies and collecting books of prophecy. But there was a problem. The inspector closed the book. Midori walks on, and Aya reveals that the problem is that he acts at will to survive Makoto's death. The girl raised her head and asked what she would be ordered to do. The old lady smiled and told them to leave him, because he wouldn't listen to them anyway. The fish are swimming, and one of the assistants said he wanted to talk to her about the incident with Makoto. The portrait of the captain is standing, and the voice said that they must find a replacement for the captain's squad. An image of the squads appeared, where Makoto's squad was crossed out. The subordinates raised their heads and turned to the director. The man and girl leaned over and said that they wanted to suggest that she create a new squad. The old woman silently looks ahead. Soldiers stand, Tokyo Business Center, second-rank Prophecy Rebels, Boss Anti-God Akatsuki Squad. The young man blocked the attack and noticed that they were sturdy and offered to attack them with magic. The girl used a spell and claimed that she was attacking from here. Squad Captain Hibiki turned around and said that she was bored. Hibiki turned around and asked if she was coming. Akane took a step forward. The girl raised her hand and used Supreme Alchemy. Akane goes and asks everyone to leave. The substance began to surround the opponents. The mage used asphyxiating gas, and pink smoke began to envelop the soldiers. The girl used a water shell. The substance envelopes the heads of opponents. The concoction caught fire as a woman's voice cast an ignition spell. The girl raised her hand. Akane clenched her fist and wished the enemy's death, hardening. Metal balls appeared on the heads of soldiers. Magic spears pierced the bodies of people. The companions look on in shock at what is happening. The magician stands against a background of dead people. The girl snapped her fingers. Akane turned around and said that she was done. The captain claps. The woman took a step and stated that poison, suffocation, flames, petrification, these were 4 completely different attacks, and added that the magician was very smart. Hibiki touched the girl's face and said that temporary enrollment was just a waste of time and tried to figure out if she would join her after the training was over. The girl smiled and replied that she would definitely think about it. The man turned around and noticed that the captain was serious, because Akane was sweet and strong and simply had to join Hibiki's squad. The woman smiled and said that if she was with him, it would be easier, and the man realized that this was what she wanted. The girl is holding her phone. Akane raised her head and told Kannagi that the 7th lesson, complete control of the 3 states of matter, had been completed and asked him to send her the next assignment. Smoke rises from the mouth of the volcano. The guy picked up the phone and noticed that she was fast. The young man raised his head and at the man's words that this was the 7th lesson, asked if it was possible to conduct the next lesson about 3 things at once. The bespectacled man took the book and said that it would be as he said. The girl tilted her head and the hero replied that he would send it soon. The building is standing, and someone asked the interlocutor if he had heard that Hiko was on the 8th errand, Ta Korazawa, Saitama. The creature raised its head, a second-rank prophecy, a sacred beast that destroys the earth, a boss, a sphinx, a devourer. Silhouette destroyed the boss with one blow. Haitohara looked at his fist and said that he had succeeded in the 8th lesson, the flash blow, and the beak strike. The captain of the Kichiro squad raised his head and praised Hikataro. People throw the young man and shout that he must join them. The guy looks up and thinks about where to step. The girl looked to the side and said on the phone that she would not lose to him, and she would defeat everyone. The protagonist leaned over and added that Shinji was gradually getting better, and he was not sitting idly by. The hero looked to the side and said that she was trying hard. The girl lowered her gaze. The cat lowered his head doomedly, and Shinji shouted why he only liked Minato, to which the young man replied that the red-haired man himself was scared to death of her. The cat holds the young man, and Akane asks if they have heard of the formation of a new squad. The girl looked to the side and said that due to the fact that Captain Makoto's squad was destroyed, it was decided to create a new unit, and the captains are chosen from those who have achieved significant success. The young man smiled and said that there were many people coming to this place. The protagonist opened his mouth in surprise when the girl announced that he had already been chosen. Haitohara smiles, and Akane reveals that they've already discussed it. The girl raised her head and said that it was Minato's squad and wanted to know if he liked the name. The young man smiled and replied that it sounded good. The protagonist rose from his seat and tried to comprehend what she had said. Minato opened his mouth and asked the interlocutor on the phone that he would be the captain. Shinomiya put the phone to her ear. The black-haired guy asked why he should be the commander. The guy with a mobile phone opened his mouth. His interlocutor said that the resistance has a dream. The papers are on fire. The girl said that the resistance wants to destroy all the prophecies that exist in this world. The short-haired guy looked to the side. A girl in black clothes stands still. The girl in the dress froze near the cathedral. Shinomiya said that this was her wish. Minato looked at the ground and thought. The girl on the other side of the phone said that this desire was at the heart of her personality. The red-haired guy frowned. The girl with purple hair folded her hands in front of her. The protagonist put his hand on Makoto's shoulder, and Shinomiya said that a captain must have a strong will to lead the entire squad. The girl with two ponytails closed her eyes, says that the protagonist has all the makings for leadership. The protagonist opened his eyes. The guy in the headphones closed his eyes and told his girlfriend to come back. She says that she has to go, and says that Minato thinks about her words. The hero objected. The volcano is smoking. The main character, folding his legs on a stone, thought for a while. He crossed his arms and thought that he would be the captain of the squad. Ichika put her hand to her forehead and asked what the protagonist was doing. Shinji turned to her. The cat is sitting on a rock. A guy with a short haircut is talking about the captain of the new squad. The mentor lifted her leg and said that if the hero wanted to become a captain, then why not? Makoto's brother replied that he also thought so. Minato closed his eyes. The woman with the ponytail looked away and thought. Melees looks up and asks if there is anyone to consult with the main character. The group standing near her objected. Isla raised one of her eyebrows. The green-haired woman looked to the side and said that she had only mastered martial arts all her life. The dark-skinned man frowned and said about the role of a leader. The Hinoki opened his mouth and said that he did not know anything. The hooded girl spread her hands and asked who the hopeless mentors were. The man with the armband objected that she was too. The long-haired tutor turned around and said that Lion must know something. A boy in green robes writes with a pen and says that he did not have time for this. The creator, the one-eyed man objected. The creator, the strategist Lion. The green-eyed boy opened his mouth and said that they already had someone who could help him with this. The man in the kimono looked away and was surprised. A stick flew into Minato, who was sitting on a rock, and the woman stepped on the water and called out to the main character. Ichika goes to Minato. She orders the hero to start training until he falls off his feet. The teacher opened her mouth and ordered the protagonist to go down to the water. He obeyed. The hero jumped into the water. He remained standing on the water, the method of movement, holding on to the rings of water. Ichika threw a stick over her shoulder and said that he already knew how to stay on the water. Minato leaned down, and the master asked how he had managed to achieve this, since it usually takes 6 months for even a qualified transcendent to reach such a level. The man with the bandage stepped onto the water and told the protagonist to repeat. The protagonist grinned and said that he had to train even when he was asleep. The hero opened his eye. Ichika swung her stick and created a purple trail. Shinji stepped back and was surprised. The mentor pointed her staff forward and said that she advised her to turn on her brain quickly, otherwise she would force it to concentrate. The protagonist, clenching the weapon in his hand, prepared to defend himself. The man in the kimono froze in place and said that she was really a suitable candidate. Melees knitted her eyebrows and concluded that the teacher was strong among modern transcendents, indeed a descendant of Hinoki. He replied that he was more like a brother, since he had no descendants. The red-haired guy raised his hands, the one-eyed man thinking that she was also training Makoto. The sword-wielding warrior looked up and said that the master was the rightful heir of her generation. Ichika raised her punching stick, a Hinoki style. The main character, dodging attacks, jumps on the water, devouring a snake. Hinoki opened his mouth and was surprised. The protagonist jumped to the side of the blow and thought that the teacher was serious, the sword of purgatory. Minato clutched the staff in his hand. The woman, grabbing the weapon in her hand, rose into the air. The kimono warrior smiled and said that this is another unknown technique. She came up with a technique that deals damage over the entire area. The mentor placed her staff on her shoulder and addressed the protagonist. She stood up and asked her opponent how he had avoided this attack, since he did not know these techniques. The guy in the white t-shirt twitched his eyebrows. Ichika asked if he had adopted such skill from the creator. The protagonist takes a fighting stance. The mentor says that she is worried. She opened her mouth and said that the hero was thinking about becoming like Makoto. The main character curled his mouth. The man who raised his sword behind his back concluded that Minato could become a captain. Shinji looked down and thought that the hero had been thinking about it all along. The main character's hands gripped the staff. He thought that then he saw Makoto with his own eyes. An image of people fighting appeared. The protagonist thinks that Makoto was the most outstanding captain of all. The hero narrowed his eyebrows and concluded that he was really thinking about it. The opponent said that there was no need for this. The protagonist looked up. Ichika opened her mouth and shouted for him to watch. Minato blocks the whirlpool of water, a style of Hinoki Tengu dance. The woman waved a stick and talks about new attacks. A guy with dark hair closed his eye. The teacher said that her attacks were created based on the techniques of the creators. Hinoki stands on a mountain of enemies he defeated. His mentor thinking that she cannot become like him because he is on a completely different level. The warrior with the bandage turned his gaze upwards. The woman mentally said that she had to be inventive to get even a little closer to his level, and for this she was honing her style. Minato opened his eye and concluded that it would take some creative work to get close to such a level. Standing on the water, he clutched his staff in his hands. Makoto holds a sword in his hands. The main character said that he does not know what the captain was like, but he was the best in the role of commander. Shinji looked down and thought that a hero wouldn't be able to be like him, but if he continued to improve, then he would achieve anything. Minato froze in place. Ichika opened her mouth and shouted. "Isn't that so?" She pointed the weapon at the protagonist, and said that he should not think about whether he could become like Makoto. The main character stands concentrated. The teacher asks what the captain left him. The red-haired guy held out his hand. He shook hands with the man with the mark on his palm. Minato opened his mouth and reported that the captain had left him a future. Ichika smiled and said that her opponent was in a good mood. She took a fighting stance with the protagonist, and replied that she would train them for the sake of the future. Minato raised his staff to strike, and the teacher told him to attack. The two warriors crossed weapons. 2 weeks later, the resistance headquarters. The building is standing. Hibiki pointed her finger at the tablet and pondered. Todoroki asked that this was the list of candidates for the role of commanders for the new squad. Shinano, who was smoking a cigarette, replied that yes, it was mostly recommendations from the captain and the executive director. He has a tablet with candidates in his hands, and he says that this time they are very surprising. Ichika and Minato are printed on the paper. Trees stand near the windows of the building. A man near the trunk says that he made his way without any problems, and the exam to choose a new captain will begin in 3 days. The gold emblem is sewn into the clothes. Eva put the phone to her ear and told the boss not to worry, because the captain of the new squad would be her, a member of the 12 apostles of the Apocalypse Eve. A man shrouded in energy tries to lift another by stretching out his hand. It was said about the ability to pervert the man Eve, one of the 12 apostles, which allowed him to replace the person he killed. The building is depicted through broken glass. When the plot told that his goal was to become the new captain of the opposing squad in order to destroy the organization from within, the apostle turned his head to the side, reasoning that Midori was killing the 12 apostles one by one. The watch is shown in blood. It was reported that he had already overcome half of it. The young man frowned. It was explained that it was impossible to defeat this monster alone, and only the survivors of them remained. Eva put her hand to her face. It was said that only to sow discord in the organization itself. She understood that this was all. The apostle looked forward, saying that everything was for the fulfillment of prophecy. 3 days later, the guy stood in front of people in the field, ordering everyone to line up. It was a large-scale training ground for the fighters. Tenjin looked ahead, shouting that the qualifying exam for the new captain of the squad was about to begin. A diagram appeared depicting people of different colors. When he said that there would be a total of 4 tests, the first 3 would reduce the number of candidates to 4 people. Depending on the results of each exam, points would be awarded: 3 points for the first place, 2 points for the second, and 1 for the third. In this scheme, one person was shown a crown. It was said that the candidate with the highest number of points would become the captain of the new squad. Shiki was with the woman and announced that the inspector general himself was watching these tests from his office. Tenjin was tense as he shouted that each of them had to make an effort. The men in the ranks took the order. Minato stared silently in front of him, wondering what all these people wanted so much to be the captain of the new squad, anyway. Red eyes burned behind the young man's back. He wondered why everyone was looking at him. 8 participants were known. Koki put his hand on his neck, wondering if there was the one Midori had brought, some special one, asking what he was thinking. Saishiro closed his eyes, saying that he thought he would become a captain after only 2 months of service in the organization. Sanobe smiled as she asked about him being an intern after all, saying that it was amazing. Hisagi was angry, wondering what kind of trainee he was to be here among them in 2 months, and she told them to stop calling her Sochika. Sakazaki adjusted his glasses, thinking that he had successfully survived the first-class prophecy. Moreover, he had a recommendation from Hinoki Ichika herself, saying that he was not so simple. Shikami took a bite of the chocolate, saying that he had heard that he even taught his peers. Kaname crossed his arms, wondering if he had become a mentor to Akane. if he was cuter than him. The plot told that Eve from the 12 apostles turned into one of them. Kannagi Minato's Special Forces Squad, the protagonist, closed his eyes, reasoning that everyone else is accompanied by their captains, and only the teacher Ichik is missing. A smartphone was shown with messages saying that she overslept. If she lost before she got there, she would dump it into a volcano. The young guy was hanging on the rope upside down as the young man reasoned that he was finished. If Ichika's teacher said she would do something, she would definitely do it. It had happened more than once. The girl pushed the boy off the cliff when Minato realized that the content of the tests was not yet known. He was upset, looking down, thinking that at least until she arrived, he had to hold out. The man announced that they were starting tests. The young man was not ready, asking again. The guy ran forward as fast as he could. Shinji rushed forward, asking the teacher if it was really training. She replied that it was, telling him to move. There was surprise in the boy's eyes. Ichika warned that if he hesitated, they would let her through. The girl sat on Shinji's back, talking about Minato's victory. Tenjin was calm as he announced a magic power measurement test. In front of the young man, magic was blazing. The hero stretched his palm forward, conjuring, and Minato's first place was announced. The guy cried, saying that he broke everything again. Apologizing, Saishiro was surprised, asking about the fact that the measuring machine was gone, took 5th place. Sakazaki, who took 3rd place, corrected his points, assuming what it meant to be an upstart. Sunbei with 2nd place asked. A radar was depicted saying that super geniuses with tremendous physical or magical abilities were very rare, and thought to specialize in magic. The guy looked away, noticing that he was the same as Shikami. The young man squatted, looking away. Shikami took 7th place, clenched his teeth, understanding what he was talking about. A summary table was shown, announcing the second trial. Tenjin looked at the crowd, talking about hand-to-hand combat, that the candidates would have to choose an opponent and fight each other, and whoever wins gets 2 points. The man made a call about who would be first. The young man raised his hand, calling Minato. Shikami smiled mockingly, offering to fight. He talked about the strongest in hand-to-hand combat, and the same upstart. The plot told that when he was 2 years old, enraged lions with pink manes ran at the woman with the stroller. It was said that he was trapped in the face of monsters that broke out of the crack while remaining in the stroller. The mother knelt down, clinging to the carriage. The baby's hand was illuminated by magic. Blood splatters flew in different directions. The girl was terrified, covered in blood, looking straight ahead. Blood dripped from the wheelchair. The baby in the stroller was on a mountain of lion corpses. It was said that he staged a real massacre and protected his mother. The following anecdote about him was mentioned. Hibiki smiled at the guy as she said that Todoroki wasn't fair that he let him fight in these trials, and the guy clarified what was wrong with recommending the strongest member of the squad. Todoroki tensed his body as he posed about how En had almost no talent for magic, but his physical strength was priceless among all Transcendents, and he had put all his energy into training his martial skills from the very first day he came to them. The guy continued to pose, shouting that no one could defeat him with his bare hands. Hibiki exhaled, saying that it was already hot here, let him stop posing. She touched her chin, thinking that there was no denying that Shikami's fighting skills were the best among all of them. The young man looked at the approaching youth, wondering whether to riddle him. Shikami bowed his head, saying that while he could talk, he would ask if he was really teaching Hiko. The guy looked ahead in surprise. The hero imagined dark-skinned people behind his back, talked about it, that he had simply passed on some advice from other people. The young man continued to meet halfway, claiming that he thought so. He was one of those who gave advice to a genius, and then boasted that he had raised him. An explosion was shown, and it was said that Hiko was a super genius like him. Only now, he got up, without the help of someone like him. Shikami was displeased when he heard that this was true. He asked again. Minato smiled as he agreed with him. The young man got angry, telling the strange bastard that enough was enough. He lowered his hand in anger. His eyes lit up white as the divine power was used, announced that it was time to start. Under Shikami's sneaker, the ground cracked as he ran to attack. He quickly ran to attack the enemy. The young man stretched his hand to the face of the main character. Minato dodged the first enemy attack. A bright flash occurred behind him. Koki clenched his teeth against the bright light. Todoroki tucked his hands behind his head, shouting that this was how En should be angry, pointing to the rampage. The young man's eyes glowed with white light as he attacked. Minato sharply dodged each of his attacks. The protagonist's face was illuminated by magic. The young man rushed forward, using Kodo style, grabbed him by the arm. The hero turned him over, slamming the scoundrel to the ground with his head, taking advantage of the touch of tenderness. Clouds of earth and were scattered to the sides from the impact. The guys opened their mouths from what they saw. They watched the opponents fight in the air, when the guy talked about how although he deflected his blow, it was incredibly powerful. Minato opened his mouth when there were boulders of earth behind him, noticing that Shikami was really strong. The young man clenched his teeth in anger, calling his opponent a bastard. The outstretched hand of the main character flashed with magic. Shikami landed on one knee while Minato was in the air. Haruki sat on the ground, noting that he had recovered so quickly. Kenin watched in horror, asking that the impact was so strong that it made a hole in the ground, and he didn't have a single scratch. Sakazaki held a tablet in his hands, saying that everything was right. It was these outstanding physical abilities that made Shikami an upstart. A whirlwind of magic followed the angry attacker as it was discussed that the strength of his body was also different from that of an ordinary human. The villain stepped on the main character, suspended in the air. Minato watched silently, reasoning that deflecting the blows alone would not be enough to defeat Shikami, wondering what he might try to respond. The guy jumped, opened his eyes wide using a kick of light. The young man kicked his opponent directly in the body. The guy pushed off the ground, multiplying by. He stretched out his leg, activating a punch. The main character pierced the enemy with his foot, used the heel of the radioactive glow. A blue stream of energy threw the young man from side to side, piercing through the energy. Excited spectators watched with surprise. Minato watched as his opponent fell not far to the ground. Shikami was unconscious, steam coming from his mouth. The voice announced that he was in hand-to-hand combat. The guy looked away when he was declared the winner, who received 2 points. The dark-skinned people rejoiced at the victory. Hisagi smirked as she said that no matter how you look at it, he seems to have surpassed Shikami's physical abilities, asking Sakazaki for information about how Sakazaki didn't say he jumped out with magical powers. The guy typed on the computer, thinking that he didn't think that Minato had such advanced combat skills. He pressed a key, realizing that he hoped that if he was not touched, he would fall through somewhere. Sakazaki tensed, chasing away thoughts in his head that he could be a hindrance to him. In his half-open eyes, the silhouette of a young man could be seen. The young man opened his eyes silently. Minato sat next to his opponent, conjuring magic, listening to the fact that it was better for him not to move. The main character with the girl behind his back stared at Shikami, explaining that he was now healing his wounds. The young man closed one eye, saying what kind of nonsense it was. He had a lot of magical power, and he was physically strong, specifying that he could also heal. Minato lowered his head as he listened to the fact that he was almighty. The young man was kneeling in front of the corpses of people as it was said that no matter how advanced the skill was, he still couldn't revive a body that was too damaged. The guy smiled, looking at the light, replied that he did not, because many things were beyond his control. Shikami expressed his displeasure when he heard that he might get up. Not far from the rivals, a big explosion thundered. The young men watched in surprise when Minato indicated that this was the final hand-to-hand fight. The young man was furious, asking about the fact that he was final, and how long he was passed out. The hero replied that about 5 minutes. He explained that after them, everyone quickly divided into pairs. Koki strangled Kaname when he said that the fighting had begun almost at the same time. Sanobe cried on her knees as smoke poured from Asahina's palm. Minato opened his eyes wide, noticing that the two couples had finished quickly, but Hisagi held out her palm in front of Sakazaki when it was said that the two had tightened. The guy in glasses stood in a straight stance. The girl shouted his name in fury. She struck one blow after another, asking questions about what he thought was strong. Wasn't he, thought also skillful, and therefore calm. Hisagi used her mana to throw him aside, shouting that she was just about to do so. The girl was heading for the attack, exclaiming that if he didn't have something outstanding, then he was just another replaceable pawn, and being able to do a little bit of everything was not what made a captain look good. The young guy adjusted his glasses, answering that, unfortunately, he did not share the opinion of what a captain should be. Blood splatters were shown when it was said that the jump out of the Special Forces squad, such geniuses with outstanding talents could not be repeated. Even if ordinary people were assigned to them, they would not be able to keep up with them, and sooner or later death would overtake them all. Sakazaki claimed when the protagonist stood behind him that the ability to flexibly respond to any changes in the situation with high experience in all areas would increase the survival rate of the entire squad by at least 1%, and he aspires to become such a captain. People in black walked near portraits of people. The young man looked away, mentioning that by the end of the battle, the entire squad must not be allowed to die. The main character listened in surprise to how it happened at Captain Suho's. Shikami began to knead his fists, addressing the bespectacled man. With the help of threats he announced that he was about to be pulverized. Minato stood with his back to him. He thanked the young man. Hisagi flew upwards using the martial art of a sharpened chain blade. The girl struck a powerful blow at Sakazaki. The guy with glasses silently stared at the approaching energy. There was a bright flash of light. Sakazaki flew to the side, falling to the grass. Hisagi continued to advance when she saw a palm in front of her. The guy adjusted his glasses, saying that he was giving up. The girl was furious, not understanding what was happening when they shouted that she was the winner. Sanobe held her arms, asking her to calm down, but she asked about the fact that Sakazaki had jumped back on purpose. The guy replied that he did not like savages. He took off his glasses, saying that he simply realized that it would take a long time, and decided to save his strength. They still had a lot ahead of them. Minato watched Sakazaki from the sidelines, who replied that he could defeat her if he wanted to. The guy with glasses looked away, thinking that he didn't want the main character to see what he was capable of. The young man stared silently ahead. It was said that the second test of hand-to-hand combat was completed. A table was shown, and Tenjin noted that everyone had done a good job, and the next test would be after a 30-minute break. The 4 candidates with the lowest score would be eliminated, so let them be ready. Minato looked above in surprise, thinking about the lunch break and that the teacher and Shinji were running late. The boy was out of breath, his mouth open, when the main character wondered if they were lost. He bowed his head, saying that they had come. Ichika noted that he was great. The boy looked away, asking why. Shinji followed the girl, wondering if they were not at the exam range, but in the courtyard of the headquarters of the opposing fighters. The teacher walked forward, noticing what had happened recently. There was a tree in front of her when she reported that someone had died here. The girl lowered her head, noting that there were remnants of an aura here, although they tried hard to hide it. Ichika stood by the trees, reasoning that this was someone with suggestive powers. Everything around her was darkened and green footprints were visible as she reasoned that she had been killed by an even more terrible monster. Shinji stared questioningly at her back, asking about the fact that the killer was on the HQ grounds, assuming that the location was top secret. It was said that somehow, the characters were shown looking at each other when it was explained about the people calling themselves the 12 Apostles. As expected from the strongest captain, Makoto Soho learned about the existence of the opposing fighters, so this place could also be known. The boy was surprised, saying that it could not be, and why should they do it at all? The teacher walked down the road, telling Shinji that it was time to go, he needed to get to the training ground. Minato speculated that the person killed was probably from a captain's training class, but he hadn't received any reports of anyone dying. They talked about the fact that it was getting interesting. The girl gritted her teeth, Shinji tensed. It was explained that for Makoto's death, Midori would slowly take revenge. The young man stared attentively, lowering his head. A large crater in the ground was depicted when talking about the lunch break at the test to select a new captain. Sanob was putting a band-aid on the girl's face. The guys nearby were having a snack. A guy with glasses was sitting at a laptop. Minato, sitting with the young man, was surprised to see someone. In the distance were a teacher and a boy. The hero exclaimed to Ichika. The girl put her hands on her belt, smiling, and said that she had calmed him down. She would not have to throw the student into the crater. Koki looked away attentively, saying that she was. Asahin's nose turned red as he mentioned that she was one of the 5 members of the Special Forces, which Midori was also in. Sakazaki adjusted his glasses, exclaiming the girl's name. Hisagi clarified who they were explaining this to. Shinji was serious, telling the teacher that it was strange. She said that someone from the captain's class had been killed. Young characters were shown, and it was said that all 7 captains were here. The teacher, smiling, thought. She shouted the name of the main character from afar. The girl reported that there was a conversation, asking to come up. The heroes were standing by the crater, when the young man loudly asked what she wanted to say, that one of them had been replaced by one of the 12 apostles. The boy asked the dumbass not to scream. Ichika leaned on a block of earth, stating that it was quite likely, and at least from the residual footprints in the garden. The girl remembered the green footprints, saying that there was no doubt that someone from the captain's class had been killed. The lady lowered her gaze and said that despite this, they were all present today, if everything was thought over. His face was torn apart. It was assumed that someone had disguised himself. Minato's eyes widened, asking if it was bad. The boy was angry, replying that of course it was bad. Inside the organization preventing prophecies of the extinction of mankind, someone had killed the captain and taken his place. Electrical devices were shown when it was said that there was a possibility that their plan would lead to the fulfillment of the prophecy in the first place. The 2 guys listened attentively as she reasoned. Ichika smiled mischievously, declaring that it was too early to talk about it if they could all just be killed. Young people objected that it was impossible. Minato sat in front of the young men, summing up that in other words, during this exam for a new captain. The hero looked away, wondering that they also needed to find and destroy one of the 12 apostles hiding there. The girl smiled, answering that it was true, and speaking of one of the apostles, you need to understand that this is an ally of the murderer Makoto. Ichika smiled, saying that she would burn him. The hero silently looked in their direction. Minato remembered kneeling in front of the corpses, exclaiming that he was. Shinji clenched his fist as he looked at him. The young man sat on the grass, reasoning aloud. The hero looked down, thinking about what he was thinking. The man was looking at the screen. Azul held up the phone, saying that if there was an opportunity, he would like to see the crime scene, but there was none during the exam. The guy chased away in his head that the lunch break was not over yet, and if he hurried. The young man smoked a pipe, saying that such behavior could arouse suspicion in the criminal. The girl is depicted behind the balls, when it was said that if we assume that the enemy is as strong as the one they met on the snowy mountain, then he could have enough strength to kill absolutely everyone here. A man was shown clenching his fist, and there was an understanding that they should stay here as a deterrent in case of an emergency. Minato lowered his head, reasoning that it was clear that the next test should be the last one for today, so they would come after him. The young man closed his eyes, speculating about the fact that a battle had taken place on the territory of the headquarters, as a result of which the captain died. There was a question that it was possible that none of the creators felt it. Ichika looked ahead, talking about what could be possible. After all, they had been holed up in the mountains for a month. A volcano was shown when the girl stated that this place is a sacred mountain where a force acts that disrupts the flow of energy. Hinoki Itorio is the land of enlightenment. Melees looked away, adding that the ability of the disguise was such that it could not be felt until it approached, proving that they were indeed facing an enemy of the 12 apostles level. Azul exhaled, wondering why they were explaining all this, asking not to take his screen time. Ichika asked him to be quiet and ordered to look for the culprit. Minato remembered the teacher's words, wondering if the whole clan was like that. The man, thinking, smoked a pipe. The main character lowered his head, banishing in his head that he could ask Miss Hinoki one question, said about the teacher. The guy looked ahead, asking if it could be that the enemy disguised himself not as a captain, but as one of the candidates. The guys silently looked into his eyes. The girl did not take her eyes off, reasoning that they were recommended as a new captain. Battles were shown in the trials, when she added that there was indeed such a possibility. Minato was getting to his feet when the teacher said that captains should not be excluded from the list of suspects, noting that this was true if the next test was again to test combat abilities. The young man smiled, saying that he would try to shake him up a little. A picturesque field was shown when it was announced that the break was over, and the third test began. The hero filled out a paper. It was a written exam. The candidates sat down for their jobs when Tenjin announced that this was a complete isolation. Conversations were strictly prohibited, smartphones were confiscated. Minato reasoned that this was a complete failure. There would be no shaking, and even worse, there were so many questions about the rules of the organization that he knew nothing about at all. The guy clutched his head, reading the questions on a piece of paper. He realized that although this was an exam for the rank of captain, so this was to be expected. He opened his eyes wide, realizing that it was not the time to give up and he had to think to the last. The cat was sleeping in the carrier when the announcement of the results appeared. The top 4 of the table were noted. The main character was upset, thinking about what didn't work out. It was said that he took the last place in the written test. The young man came up from behind, saying that the 4 worst at this stage were eliminated. Minato was surprised to see Shikami, who praised the hero. Sakazaki was adjusting his glasses when he found out that he had taken first place in the written exam. The guy closed his eyes, saying that it seemed that only the 2 of them managed to score 0 on the written exam. The young man replied that this bespectacled guy got the highest score. Annoying. Shikami lowered his head, saying that the young man managed to hold on to first place. So he is amazing, and he thought he could stay with 2 points for the fight and 1 for magic. But it turned out that he did. Minato listened attentively, looking away that Shikami would still come to support him in the final stage. Whoever became the captain still had to decide whether he wanted to serve under him or not. Behind the man's back was a sword and 6 people, when it was said that the minimum allowable number of people for the squad was 7. In other words, the captain needed to recruit 6 other fighters, and therefore he also needed to think about which of the candidates he would take into his squad if he became a captain. The young man slapped the hero on the shoulder, remembering something. He pointed his finger at himself, saying that if he wanted his squad to be the strongest in battle, he recommended inviting him first. Shikami raised his hand up as he was leaving, asking the hero to do his best, and in response he heard words of gratitude. Azul towered over the young man, saying that he was now in the garden. Minato asked him if he understood who the criminal was. The heroes exclaimed, asking again. The man exhaled smoke, saying that he was a detective. He needed evidence to be sure. He took the receiver in his mouth, introducing all the candidates, said that he would drive the apostle into a corner.